Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of ELO Heaven. I am joined, of course, by @CSGO on Twitter, and we have with us a very special guest who speaks to us from his porcelain throne. It is the one and only James Bardolph. How you doing, James?
I am good, thank you. I'm in transit in Mexico on the way to America. But right now, people from Europe or UK Ireland can't go directly. They can't go to the USA if they've been in Europe or the UK and Ireland in the 2 weeks. Therefore, I have to go to America having not been there for 2 weeks. Therefore, I'm in Mexico for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that is a very wild one. What do you make of this travel restriction stuff, Vu? Because you had an interesting response.
It varies wildly per country in England. As far as the US, I only know it's the European Union, which is why a lot of teams, I think it's one reason why they're going to Serbia, because they're not in the European Union, so they can people can fly back and forth without issue from that. But yeah, that's how things are happening at the moment.
The Serbia thing is a weird connection to me because there's been obviously like this Relog Media group, which is based in Serbia. They've been running tournaments. We talked about them a little bit on the show. There's a couple of times where, obviously they have all of these boot camps, and you would think that like maybe they just haven't thought about this very heavily. I would suspect not. You would think that would be an opportunity because so many teams went to Serbia. You could have done tons of content about that. You could have had something the Serbian government maybe, I don't know, like again, I don't know how organized they are over there, but something that they could have like done to say like we're a center for these esports competitors. I don't know how nationally recognized it is for there, but that is an interesting one just because so many teams have done it. It's almost like somebody found a loophole or somebody found out that this is a thing, so they said, hey, let's head over there, and much like the rest of esports in many ways, people followed suit, the first person who had the idea. So it's an interesting location.
It's not the richest country. So maybe it would be hard for him to put something on, but obviously there is definitely a PR angle. The food there is amazing as well.
Yes, I've heard so.
Yeah, I remember actually earlier seasons of ECS when we had Yanko out staying with us. We had a massive house in Westminster where all the Vietnamese are. We had a massive house like bang in the middle of the Vietnamese community, and he was putting on these barbecues and stuff. But we've done events. We've commentated at events in Serbia before, and like they've got really nice hotels, and the food is proper banging. If you're a meat eater, it's a great place to be, and the people are super friendly as well. So it's not too shabby a place to be if you're stuck in Europe for X amount of months playing CS.
Vu, I heard that not only are you a meat eater, but you're very specifically a chicken eater. But the other thing I've heard from a certain corner of the internet is that you're chicken shit, okay? Because you don't know anything about clutches or cadiaN or Gambit or pro level CS. So can you explain?
I think the argument is that I'm just trying to be controversial.
Okay.
To generate apparently traction for our podcast, which I'm sorry to Pronogo. I could give a fuck about this podcast. I really could. Like, it's just not a big fucking deal for me. If the podcast does well or it does poorly, it's not going to change my fucking life. Like, really, there's other things I'm doing that are much more important. How fucking important putting a comment out that cadiaN's clutch is overrated. Like, shit, dude. I watch back a lot of the top professional clutches that are like the GOAT clutches.
Yeah.
A lot of them do rely a little bit on luck. Like Simple's fucking op no scope, like that. This is not FPL. I mean, there is apparently someone did the breakdown. Apparently it's like 70% chance to hit that. So it's actually not that unlikely. Although in my experience, like if I was to no scope someone from that range, even aiming the same, it would be like 0% chance. There's no fucking hit. I'm never hitting that in my life.
No scope.
I don't think I've ever hit a no scope in my life, man. And I've got a dot on the middle of my screen too, so I know the shit's on the motherfucker. Okay, but what really defines a good clutch in my eyes is that the other team doesn't massively misplay. It's the great play from the person in the clutch that really makes the clutch possible. And there's obviously got to be some misplays, but like, you know, it really takes me out of it when Gambit enters is looking CT from ticket. So we know as a flank as possible. cadiaN, by the way, makes his play out apartments a lot. It's not uncommon. And Shiro's just fucking brain AFK. Then enters like Nafany swings and enters. I thought he was reloading behind triple. He's just fucking sitting there jerking himself off. Like nobody on Gambit will watch that back and be like, yeah, I think we played that reasonably well. Like I guarantee you, if you got someone on Gambit, they'd be like, yeah, we played that like fucking shit. It just takes me out of it, man. I just can't. It's not the best clutch of all time if it relied on Gambit playing that badly. That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair fucks. What
I
did you
think
think
what was
about
the
it, James?
score? The score was like 14-6, right?
15-6, yeah.
15-6, yeah.
15-6. Yeah. So, I mean, I can see what Vu's saying there. I remember when Kusta was getting initially overhyped. Not to say that he wasn't a good player or anything, but I think it was blown a bit out of proportion. I remember there was a similar highlight on Inferno on the A bomb side, which is like, yeah, that's cool, but people are going ballistic about it, like, oh my god, this is insane. But I was like, it's that he's got a few layups here, which is not to take anything away, but like it's not the strongest play ever. I mean, it was a really sick clutch, but yeah, there was some 1v1s there which weren't necessarily necessary, but I think it was like an awkward stage of, he could be going to save now. Oh fuck, we've kind of thrown around. So I can definitely see what Vu is saying there. I mean, for me, if you're going to say best clutch ever, I'm like, they had 9 match points.
Yes.
I would take that kind of thing into consideration there as well. It's not necessary. It's not like their backs are to the wall necessarily. Like in the vacuum of that round, yes. But if you're saying best clutch ever, I think you have to look at a really wide picture there. But I mean, it was still a sick clutch. Like I'm happy for cadiaN. I've watched him playing Prax like 5 years ago in the meeting room of our offices in London when he was here to do shows with us and stuff. So it's cool to see where he's gone. So. I guess like the people who will overrate it, as long as everybody enjoys it, then fuck it.
I think cadiaN's got a great story. Like I remember when it was looking like he wasn't even gonna be in the pro scene for a while, right? Like it looked like he was kind of moving over to talent, and I thought he did. When I saw him do what was he doing, analysis, or was he casting? I remember thinking very highly of cadiaN as like a member of talent. I thought that he was, in my opinion, one of the best crossovers from what I can remember, one of the best crossovers of pro players moving to doing stuff outside of the game, because a lot of them, it really feels like they're kind of fucking pigeonholed, to be honest.
I think one thing that's good about cadiaN on the desk is that he has personality. And obviously, we live amongst gamers, and I think the hardest thing for analysts, especially ex-pros, is like having personality and not just being mad boring. But the other part is a lot of them are really shy. They're like scared to give their actual opinion. Like there's been times where they'll say something reasonably polite, which isn't too committing. They're not going to commit too much to like criticism. But then when we go to break, they're like, "Oh, I can't believe they did that." Fucking. I'm like, say this on the fucking camera. Like this is what people want to hear. But people are just like too hesitant to do that. But again, cadiaN, like he has personality, which puts him ahead immediately of like a lot of people. So that certainly helps for on camera stuff.
The on-camera angle is really interesting to me because obviously when Flashpoint was originally announced, I was really a big proponent of the idea that, we'll actually get some trash talk again between teams and players specifically. Like it's all well and good to get the hot takes on the analyst desk. Even then, you don't really go too deep into criticism. I guess, some people have harangued Pimp, for example, for being very critical on an analyst desk. The problem for me is like, well, if you're going to be like, I don't even think he's overly critical personally, but if you're going to, as a community of fans, if people just keep sort of harping on that over and over again, you're going to get into some situations where you're basically discouraging any sort of behavior like that. People essentially like Pimp obviously have to succeed in spite of the criticism and in spite of the fact that maybe they are going to be acting as almost the heel, so to speak, for the analyst desk segment. When you get players doing it, though, that's actually what I think we want to see when we're watching these people compete, when we're seeing them as competitors instead of just people who are controlling a video game character. When we get that abstraction in our head to really follow through like we do with sports, conventional sports, that I think is what can really elevate rivalries. It's what can really give a lot of meat. Like, there's a very small example of this that wasn't really done through like anybody on camera or anybody saying anything. But when I think it was Axel actually knifed cadiaN in the back in the middle of one of these Blast games, so the Blast series, and where Gambit eventually took it 2-1 in that series, they had revenge. The knife onto cadiaN specifically was really enjoyable to watch for me. I was like, holy shit! Like they specifically figured it out. Like, obviously they had to get into that situation, but having that was beautiful. Their very next rematch, and cadiaN's the one who gets knifed. And at the time too, you could even criticize it from a strategic level, like, like if Gambit just hold there and then like trigger discipline, they can frag 2-3 people. Instead, he knifes him and runs away, and he only gets one. Still an advantage, but you could have gotten more with that. The fact that he instead chooses to knife, I think, is almost like kind of a trash talk in and of itself. Like, I could have beaten you even harder here, but I decided to knife you because it's what you deserve, or some shit like that. I'm kind of reading into it, but that's what gets me excited personally about these matches, is imagining the way that things can go. And if that happened on a LAN, and then like after the round is over, Axel stands up and starts yelling at cadiaN, like knife that bitch, whatever he says, he's probably cooler than me. So he says something like that. That would be really nice. That would be entertainment in addition to the high level of CS that we're accustomed to watching in some of these top tier 1 tournaments. So what do you guys make on trash talk itself? Because it's a lot harder on the online era in theory, but you could throw it in for interviews. You could throw it in all over the place. Like, I feel like it's just gone completely absent in terms of player against player.
I think for me, okay, there are a few things here, right? Sure. One of them is like, if you just think of what gaming is, it's not everyone, but like gaming, it can be like a refuge for some people. If you're like socially awkward, it can be easier as a game and so on. That doesn't mean everybody is. Again, like Katie is an example of somebody who's reasonably normal and has a personality, but some people are just super awkward as well. So I think a lot of people just don't know how to trash talk. There can be a language barrier as well, bearing in mind like most of our main broadcasts are in English. So if you're not like take RPK, for example, he doesn't speak a lot of English. So, bearing that in mind, I mean, you still have like enough, like the Nordics and so on. You've got enough players, NA, etc., to do the crash talk. But one thing is like some players are going to be awkward about it. And I don't know if it's like, I don't know what the support systems are, but I feel like players in general are not really exploiting their brand or even making a brand. We can see like Elige, for example, recently has been putting out videos and so on. And I think some people, I don't know if they're getting advice from somewhere, but they're definitely like learning, okay, I need to actually use my name and make a brand for myself. But I think part of it is, for some players, it could be laziness. For other players, I think it could be just like a lack of awareness. Like they don't know that they should be doing this stuff and how it can benefit them long term. So I think there can be a few different reasons why we don't have the trash talk / personality. And it doesn't need to be like, I'm going to shit on you. It can be like something cheeky as opposed to like something aggressive where like, later on you might get egg on your face and so on. There's different levels it can be, but I think there are also different reasons for why we don't see much of it. It was a shame in the first season of Flashpoint that we had absurd shouting, players shouting while we still had players in the studio, but that didn't last very long. But we have seen it here and there. But yeah, in an online era, I think that teams probably don't have the structure where the players are being educated on, okay, this is why it's important for you to be more than a line of text on a server and some headshots in a kill feed. Like, there's more personality you can have in these certain ways. I just think like I think it's mostly like a lack of awareness, lack of understanding about the benefits of it, and some laziness as well.
Well, I'll tell you, like, so I'm not going to name the guy because I feel like that would be kind of rude, but I know I'm friends with this guy. There's a couple people I know actually that I've literally offered to help them make a YouTube channel, like, because I've thought they're entertaining people, they're very informative when they talk about the game, and they're professional players. And I've told them, look, you should make a YouTube channel. You should try and get stuff done. I will help you make it. I'll help you with editing. I'll literally do titles and thumbnails for you just to get you off your feet. And I don't really want like I don't really want anything out of this. I just want to help you make this shit. And they've been like, maybe, you know, kind of like, yeah, it sounds like a good idea. You know, maybe we'll do that someday. And then, you know, at least one of the people that I'm talking about, the reason they ended up making a YouTube channel isn't because they got a surge of motivation to make a YouTube channel. It's because someone that was editing said, hey, can I get permission to make your YouTube channel for you? And I will do everything. And it's just your name. And they're like, okay, well, fuck it. Yeah, sure. And it's like, dude, come on, man. Like, I offered to help you with this shit. And it's just like you to the point where the only reason you've made a YouTube channel and, you know, it's done fairly well is because someone is 100% offered to do the whole thing. And you're just like not involved at all. It's just like, people don't really think about it. And the first guy I'm thinking about with that is someone that really would have benefited from that type of exposure to have a YouTube channel made because he was struggling at the time in terms of exposure. But I think, you know, there is a level of they're just trying their best to be really good. And so they don't even, I guess they don't have the motivation or they just don't think it's important. The other thing is, the community is really harsh on people that trash talk, and for some reason the community can't understand like trash talk as hype versus trash talk as trash talk. And I always look at it as like, oftentimes what happens is one guy will trash talk, and then after the match, one other team has won. He's like, yeah, this guy's just a shit player. Like, fuck this dude. And it's like, have you not understood the concept of trash talk? Like, it's such a pussy move to do it fucking after the game, after you've already won to try. That's another thing that much, and the community doesn't seem to fucking at all actually understand there's a difference there.
Right.
I will say there's also a lot of morons who will go and like send DMs to people on Instagram, just cussing them, telling them I want your mother to die and all this crazy stuff. So I don't get this kind of messages. I know even Maui Snake does, which is hilarious to me. But you know, that's a perspective I don't have, which might put some people off. You know, because not everybody can handle that the same way. Like if someone says some bullshit to me, I will just cuss them out immediately. I don't give a fuck really. But you know, not everybody is the same in that respect. But I think like maybe it's a little off topic, but it's not so much trash talk. But in terms of like making a brand for yourself and so on, because you spoke about knives earlier, right? If you look at, I think how you play in the server is part of your like personality as well. I think some great examples of like a JW, for example, who might not make the most efficient, safest play all the time, but he makes the most exciting play, and you can see who he is on the server. If you remove the names, you'd probably be like, that's probably JW. And I think you could say a similar thing about Fallen. But he is one person who has made a brand for himself. He's got his own brand of keyboards and various other things. So he's really like exploited his brand and image for his own benefit, which so many more people could be doing. But I think maybe some are just sitting on a salary and just like, whatever, man, I'm just going to play on the server, do my practice, and then go and buy some shoes or whatever, and not really seeing the wider world which could potentially be open to them.
There was some talk
which includes
show.
trash talk.
Yeah. There was some talk show that I was listening to years and years ago, which put it into perspective for me pretty early, where somebody was like talking about players and like some really high skilled players. And the comment was, yeah, this guy's great in the server, but in real life, he knows 3 trap songs and that's it. And so like, you know, they don't really have that much of a personality developed to even show off to then like sharpen into a brand. And that I think is maybe plays a bit more to what you were talking about with the gamer or gaming comment, where you have the idea that some people don't have the same social skills as somebody who grew up playing team sports or whatever. So there's obviously that will depend on a case-by-case basis. Vu, do you know what my top 1 Flashpoint 1 moment was? Do you remember this story? I've told this on this podcast before, I think.
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
So my top 1 Flashpoint 1 memory was when it's surprisingly not Smooya. It was when there was, I think it was Orglis against Dignitas, but I might be wrong about that. It might have been some other NA team. I believe it was an NA team that they were facing off against. And obviously Dignitas had gadiaN standing in. gadiaN not notorious for his trash talk exactly. But when we had a match where they were feeling pretty good, the NA team was owning, we'll say, and then Dignitas started a comeback. And of course, during the whole time, the NA team's like yelling at them or whatever. And Dignitas, as they're coming back, you know, they're 3 or 4 rounds into the comeback, the other side is quiet, and you just hear gadiaN go, "Why are you quiet?" And it got me. It fucking got me, man. Like, why? Where is your voice? Something like that. Some insane, like, just perfect. And that's not even like, he's obvious. That's not like high class, high skill banter. But the fact that he felt like he could do that, and that he went for it. That was really choice from my point of view. And I do wish we got more of that, to what Bardolph was saying earlier. I wish we got a lot more of that stuff, because who knows how many more like surprising moments from these players who maybe do have that language barrier, maybe don't have that personality sharpened just yet. That would have been a developing ground for them, realistically speaking. And then you really could have had that. I think Smooya already had sort of developed his own brand in that sense, with his fucking dolphin screeches or whatever he was doing. So the fact that he was able to, continue to capitalize on that over time, that's fine.
But the orgs should be helping them with that as well, because let me give you an example from the fighting game scene. Okay, so Echo Fox used to sponsor this guy Takedo, who's like one of the best players of all time from Japan, and he got into the habit of when he would sit down, because he'd have like a Versa setup, so each player would have their own monitor. He would measure his distance from the desk and the distance of the monitor from the edge of the desk. And then Echo Fox made Takedo branded measuring tape that people at home could buy. And so imagine if Smooya's org had like inflatable dolphins with his face on that they were giving out at live events or something. Or I don't know, paper megaphones or vuvuzelas or something for August if they had an org. There's so many things, there's so many ways you could just do so much more with branding and then build a fan base. And especially with the era of, I feel like for a few years we just had teams move from org to org to org as until I suppose we reached saturation in terms of where salaries were at and so on. But that's something like if you made a new brand and come into the space and you just picked up a team, you're not going to have a fan base. But stuff like this, I think, could really help the players as well. And again, I think some of them do need leadership from people above them, especially with if we take a player who, let's say, they haven't figured out their passions yet, they're still turning from boys to men and so on. My room service is calling me. This is distracting me. What was my point? So if they're traveling non-stop, I don't know where they're going to find the time to actually figure out what they like and stuff like this.
Sure. So
I do put some of the responsibility on the orgs that these players are playing for as well.
I think orgs definitely need to have at least. I think orgs would be very capable of getting players to do much more in that regard. Especially, I feel like when it comes to Tarek specifically, someone who's looked at as having built a brand, content creation, all that type of thing. But what the fuck has he done with his branding stuff since he joined EG?
He says content in games.
I feel like Tarek with EG is such an obvious meld to get out some content to really develop his personal brand, and that would help the team. And everyone talks about his branding and his personality as if he's done fuck all with it in the last 2 years. I feel like he hasn't done anything with it. He's just kind of been playing. And especially if you're underperforming, I can understand wanting to focus more on the gameplay than anything else. But obviously, even a player with an established ability to do that type of thing, it doesn't seem to be capitalizing on it while playing. And definitely the fact that they're traveling all the time, they're playing constantly. I'd imagine there's just not a lot of motivation to do that type of thing. So the org would probably have to help them take time out of their practice to do that. And maybe players just aren't super down with that. I also think there's a reality where I think other teams don't take trash talk very well. So if you have someone that trash talks, even as banter entirely, it might hurt their potential perspectives later on in their career, where other teams don't want to pick up this player because they're seen as toxic, because they banter. It does cause an extra layer of problems, basically.
Have you felt that that's the case with some of these NA players? Is there attitude issues or toxicity issues that in these up and coming areas? Because you've got a lot of
up and coming NA players are actually just mega cunts. They're they're just actual. And I've noticed it's really funny that the most toxic people aren't usually the people that have been pro. Those guys are usually pretty chill. It's the people that have played. I said this specifically. The most toxic people in NACS are players that have played 1 to 4 matches of advanced, which is not even near professional. It's because they're good enough that they can shit talk people, but they're not good enough yet that they actually are confident in their abilities so that they don't have to just shit talk everyone. And, you know, because once you're confident in your abilities, like if you're trash talking, you might trash talk, you might get annoyed and like shit talk someone, but it's not the same as like you enter a pug with someone that's played 3 games of advanced and they're like, yeah, this whole team is shit, like this game's already over, like we're done with it. And so you have a lot of that, I think, in MDL, where there are a lot of players, I think, that are just basically like, they know they can't go pro. So basically their goal is to shit talk everyone worse than them and be like, yeah, you're never going to go pro either. Like, I don't know. There is definitely a big problem with personalities in NA. I haven't seen too much in NA of people being like labeled as super toxic because of, you know, while not being toxic. Although I have heard, you know, there are people I know that are like a little bit dry personality wise and like make kind of like dry humor jokes that have gotten kind of suggested that maybe that's been the case, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think a lot of the time in NA, people are actually just fucking assholes, like, and they deserve the label.
Fair enough. What do you think
I
about
have to say, playing, I normally play free-for-all deathmatch, but on the rare occasion where I might play like Valve deathmatch in North America, it's okay. There's a weird culture. All right, forget that for a second. On surf servers in America, there's just the weirdest conversations with I don't even know. People are talking about really weird shit. But on like Valve deathmatch servers, like just click to deathmatch, there's like I feel like there's a lot of like young kids who are saying stuff, you know, the most offensive stuff possible.
Yes.
There's like racist stuff, 9/11 stuff, etc. And I don't know if the general like dumb attitudes stems from this, because what I spend like most years, I spend almost half my time in America, and obviously I'm normally playing CS nonstop wherever I am, and I find like in Europe, I think you have partly like some different cultural problems. You have I think people get frustrated. Not everyone's fluent in English, and they start swearing at each other when things go bad. But in America, I feel like some people take pride in being morons.
Sure.
There's just something about it. It's just like this is where I'm gonna like. This is what I'm gonna be known for. Just being a complete pleb, saying just mad offensive stuff. So I don't know how you like solve that wider problem, but I feel like maybe that's got part of it, which is why you have all this like insecure stuff where people are just abusing each other nonstop.
It's actually a conversation I had with Davey where he really thinks it is a cultural problem, in that when you look at players in NA, they just don't take advice. They just won't. They just, Elige will tell someone like you played this wrong and they'll immediately start arguing. And I've definitely had that in coaching where players will basically know that they're wrong. Like there's the first team I ever coached. I remember specifically 2 players in one round, they both made pretty egregious mistakes. One of them made the initial mistake and one of them made a mistake that would never have happened if the initial mistake hadn't happened. And so I try to talk to like both of them that they fucked up. And one of them's just like, yeah, but what about the other guy? And the other one's like, well, I never would have made that mistake if you hadn't made your mistake. And it's just like this weird back and forth where it's just like they both know they fucked up. It's not even a question of if they fucked up. It's a question of if they'll just accept that they fucked up and move on. And people are just like, it's very much like just not accepting criticism. And I remember I brought this up in my Discord, and the first thing someone did, which like the most American like response possible, which was, well, you should always consider any advice anyone's giving you, and really like take a second and really think about it before you accept it. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not the fucking point I'm making here, right? Like if Elige tells you you're doing something wrong, say yes, sir, I accept that, and then maybe afterwards, maybe you can go back and be like, do I really agree with that? Like what parts of that do I agree or disagree with? But you take it as like he knows more until you have a reason to believe otherwise. But that's not how the shit works, you know?
Yeah, or you ask for some sort of clarifying, like, well, Mr. Elige or Vu, whoever you are in this analogy, why do you think this way? And then you can get some actual information instead of just arguing with somebody who's significantly more experienced in this matter too. Actually, Vu, this is something that was really triggering me in the comments talking about the whole clicks Phillip versus by the numbers stuff that was happening, where so many people were like, Vu doesn't know anything about being a YouTuber. Or basically that's what their comment put down to, is like, we should know better because we watch Clicks Phillips content, and Vu has no idea what the psychology of this man who literally makes money the same way he does thinks. Like he's got no idea. So I don't know if you have anything in particular to say.
I don't know. I'll accept that
fun.
I could definitely be wrong. Although some of the comments really were fucking out there. Like one of the comments was like, suggesting that he wasn't going to ask Thorin if he would like his content to be used. Like, and I'm just like, dude, what do you think you should count yourself lucky means? Like, is there any context where you should count yourself lucky followed by a statement is meaning that statement is a positive? Like, come on, man.
You should count yourself lucky I didn't hand you $100 right now.
That's fucking weird, it is, man.
So did you, while we happen to be on the subject, did you have any sort of takes on this stuff, James? I don't know if you followed the whole the drama when it happened. It's not exactly related to esports. Exactly.
Oh, I honestly don't. I'm just so uninterested in drama.
Fair enough.
It's like, cool, people are arguing. Wish them all good luck, and I just move on to the next.
There you go.
I just don't give a. It's just all like, for me. It's like, it's just not of interest to me at all. It's like, people are arguing. Cool. What's the next piece of news? You know?
Yeah, that will always be true. People will always be arguing. So it's not exactly the most interesting thing, I suppose. I did have a couple of questions about obviously this upcoming Flashpoint stuff. We talked a little bit about player brands as well, and I'll bring that into the discussion a little bit later. But with the Flashpoint 3 being an RMR event, with finally you guys have Astralis now, which is pretty exciting. It only took Thorin to leave, of course, and then it all comes to fruition. I was curious as if to, like, I don't, again, you said earlier before we started, you're not super like involved in the planning side of things, but I was curious if you had anything in particular you were looking forward to at this event. Like, obviously we've got a couple of different storylines, but it does feel like it's going to be a very different roster of teams now that we see at this upcoming Flashpoint event. So was there anything in particular that caught your eye about, like, when you were made privy to the plans and when some things have been discussed, anything that you were really pushing for? Like, I really want to see this team out there, or was it even really an option for you to get involved in that respect? Because I'm curious as to your general thoughts on the whole Flashpoint 3 upcoming tournament.
I think, for me, it's mainly been a focus on the logistics and how things were panning out, where we're going to do it, things like that. But in terms of planning, I'm not involved in that stuff. But I think from my perspective, essentially as a commentator, it's some of the previous ones. I suppose some of the teams have been not in the best place. So I think we will have a stronger lineup, which will be great because then it's the most like mentally stimulating CS. So that's fantastic. And I think, we're seeing some potential, like, as far as Astralis are concerned, we're seeing some potential weirdness with, some of the rumors there.
Yes.
Although I am somewhat concerned because I think I could be wrong, but I think Device has got IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So when they said that they were trialing someone else, I'm just hoping it's not like something relating to that, and it's something else. Ideally, if that is happening. So I'll wait and see. But obviously there'll be a lot of interesting storylines going into it, which is also one of the biggest things for a commentator. So we've got a lot more to talk about in that respect. But apart from that, I'm just excited to do some bloody commentary again. With all this pandemic stuff. Things have been weird. Funnily enough, I was supposed to be doing like the Fun Spark stuff, which is happening at the moment. But they had like this absurd amount of prize money and stuff, and they just had a clusterfuck with everything COVID relating going on. Just fucks their plans like multiple times over.
I agree. Their rates are too low. Just drop that one. That's fine.
They yeah, it was more a communication thing. They kind of really fucked up with me, but I think they mean well, so I haven't said much about it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing an event. It's going to be nice to be around people again. We've done some bedroom broadcasts since then. Like we did the summit online, which was really weird. I think that format hurt that show a lot. So it's nice to be on LAN with people again. At least like the commentators are on LAN. The personalities and so on. So And yeah, from a personal point of view, it's nice to break the monotony. It's very much like Groundhog Day in a pandemic, which I think is somewhat depressing for everybody. Just like a very similar routine, and when you're used to traveling so much, it kind of sucks when you're not able to. So I think like a lot of it might be a breather for some of the orgs who have rosters which are in flux and so on. So I think the timing is good for Flashpoint in general. But it's obviously it's going to be like a shitload of storylines leading towards.
It's going to be on LAN, right?
A major.
A Flashpoint.
I don't think
on LAN. Yeah, no.
The players are not going to be on LAN. No,
okay.
We're going to be. Yeah, we're going to be in a studio in LA, but we're doing the European one. So
because I'm just remembering that they were saying, I remember Valve's initial statement was basically like, we don't want to do the major until we can have RMRs on LAN. I think that was what they were talking about initially. So I just figured I haven't read the news about these, but I had assumed
it might be one of the later RMRs.
I don't think they are. I don't think they're on LAN. I could be wrong, but I don't think they are.
Yeah.
That'll be a nice return to form, though. I guess there are a couple of studio events that are planned very recently. There was yet another carrot and stick ESL situation where they said, trust us, guys, this next one's on LAN. Trust us, guys, this next one's a studio event. So we'll see how that shapes up. Apparently that's supposed to be as early as June, though. So that could be pretty interesting, finally getting the teams on. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but the idea of these online sort of discussions where is this team only good because of the online era, or how much of the success for this team is due to the online era. And a point that was raised was when you move to studio, it's not like being in a LAN with a bunch of crowd people, shouting and hyping you up and deafening you in that sense. It's almost like an online, like it's a LAN light or something, right? It's online LAN. So it'll be interesting to see what these teams do when they are in a studio, and you can eliminate the online factors in terms of the gameplay, but you still have those external things like the noise and the crowd and the atmosphere, sort of more like the online style where there is none. They're not really a factor. So I think that'll be an interesting storyline to pluck at too whenever we end up getting that a little bit more. Because obviously I think even this Blast event that's coming up that just happened was not exactly studio, even though the teams were mostly boot camping in the same facility. It was just like really low ping, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the last Blast event, it's just if you can't get every team on in the studio, if you can't do that, then it's just not fair to the competitive integrity of the event to not just have the servers off campus or off site. Because it really is a different game between LAN and online.
Yes,
so if you have some games played on LAN and some online, you might have a final where one team is, I mean, it's not like you can't play on LAN if you're an online team, but I promise you there are oppers. Like I remember, when I was playing a lot in the Vancouver LAN scene, in the late 2000s, there was people that would be really good online, like premier players that couldn't compete with like me and Mahone on LAN because we knew how to play on LAN and they struggled. It's especially with oppers. Opping is a lot different on LAN and online because on LAN or online you can just peek into anyone. If you peek any angle, you can always peek into anyone. If an opper's holding an angle, if you're really quick, you can kill them. On LAN, you can't do that. You have to be a lot more careful with the angles you're peeking, and you have to be a lot like more safe, essentially. So there's definitely a change, even if not a huge, massive change. That would, unless you can have everyone on LAN, you just don't have any of it on LAN.
Makes sense. I think one of the elements of the whole online LAN debacle thing for me is also a lot about that atmosphere. I mean, we saw this cadiaN clutch had like, I think quite poorly edited in crowd noise on a while ago. And they like, it wasn't exactly synced up, but it could have, sort of in a roundabout way gives you the feel of like, what would this be like if there was a crowd roaring at the fact that it was
actually
all there.
The reality of what it would be like is Shiro would have turned around and he never would have fucking died. That's the actual reality is Shiro, like this clutch on LAN does not happen. Shiro turns around and doesn't get knifed. That's it. That's the end of the clutch.
Yeah. No, fair.
I remember actually, I remember there was a Ninja Diffuse. I want to say it was
Spawn.
Virtus Pro at an E-League ages ago on Mirage.
Yeah, okay.
And there was a guy, I think the last T ran past the CT and ladder. He ran in a way such as he didn't see him. And because our commentary booth was right next to the players, I didn't want to raise the alarm because I'm often standing up when I'm commentating as well. And some of the players Well, when they did one of the qualifiers for the major, they had 4 teams in the studio, and some of the players will be looking at you to see if you're reacting. You know, they'll try and get any edge they can. So I had to I couldn't commentate it the way I wanted to commentate it. I had to just be super quiet, because if I start just going nuts, they might not hear what I'm saying, but they're gonna hear my voice, and then they'll be like, hold on, something's happening, right? So I know, like, even the crowds can make grenades can make the stage rumble, and that can give an idea on if someone's in a certain area, and obviously the crowd and so on. So there's lots of like little cues for people to wonder if something's going on behind them.
Yeah, there was definitely there was some drama. I can't remember who it was. I think it was someone on Astralis, right? With the overpass connector one, where they're looking up into the right.
It was Zipex.
Yeah, that one. I mean, how far are you going to push it until you can say like this is kind of borderline cheating?
It was 2 in a row. Yeah, it was like looks at.
Yeah, he looked up and he heard something, and then he looked back and he's like, oh. Let's look back up there. I wonder what. Like, you would never see that. Like, there really is some kind of bogus stuff people can do when it comes to that type of thing. And there is like the crowd noise and just like hyping up the moments. It really sucks if you can't commentate it correctly. I remember when James first mentioned the clutch, the most famous one is Spawn in 1.6 in like 2004 CPL or something, where he's got like the most epic ninja defuse and everyone's freaking out. Guy comes back and spams him through the box because he can just he sees exactly what's going on. It's like, that is some fucking bullshit, man. Like, it really is.
You can't even control for that if you're the player in question either. You're literally just trying to win the round, and there's nothing you can do. There was some other caster-related drama, I believe, long time ago. It was some French casters at a French event, like an event held in France.
Yeah.
There's a French team in the finals or some sort of playoff scenario, and when they had the like a default spam of some kind, where there would be no indication that you were going to get a frag, or maybe it was multiple frags. Then the French commentators were like, yes, or, well, it would be oui, but you know, fucking. So that sort of thing, I think, has happened before historically. And like what you said earlier, Vu, on the previous episode, nobody wants to think that, oh yeah, the way that it works is the crowd goes, oh my God, he's knifing, he's going to knife. And then Shiro just turns around and no-scopes him or something. Like nobody wants to think that that's what's going to happen. But that probably would be what would happen. And it does change the game, maybe even more so, certainly in some ways, than like the actual ping or peeker's advantage or whatever.
I feel like it's something people don't want to talk about when it comes to like pro teams, where they're like, this team, you know, if they were on LAN, they'd never do it. And like what you're really thinking is online and on LAN is very different. Yeah. And I think it's like just kind of like a very poorly kept secret that actually some of it is like, you don't know all the tricks we use on LAN, like you've got to learn those. Like that is kind of and there is like, I feel like when pros say on LAN, sometimes there is that little subtext of like the second meaning that it's not just the gameplay that they're talking about, you know?
Sure. I didn't know that about the whole grenade rumbling the stage or anything either. That's an interesting one, because I guess that would mean that you would know they were following the grenade and then like it rumbles, and so you know that like, oh, they actually felt like it fit to the observer.
Yeah, it means it hit someone. If the nade had,
I guess if you threw it far away from yourself, that it's only going to make a big rumble. If it's close to someone else, then you know someone's there. I mean, the OG one was like throwing a flashbang and seeing if someone's screen lit up, you know, when you'd be facing each other and so on.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah, those days are gone now. But yeah, I forget which player mentioned the grenade one. So there's a few tricks certainly, but it's definitely like a fair
I'm sure you could still
do
something with the flashbangs. If like, I mean, if you've got a big enough screen, you're gonna see if the crowd is more well lit.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Oh, that was the other thing, right? Because Simple actually had I think it was during the Star Ladder Major or something, but Simple had like requested a pause because he could see like a radar reflected off of the main monitor or something. So
I think it was that like just glancing over at his team, he could see like the whole screen behind him or something.
Yeah. And because of that reflection thing going on, he didn't want it to be like, it's a stand-up move to make, but you have to imagine all of the players that maybe that noticed it, but maybe didn't call for a pause and tell them to fix this lighting issue, because maybe it wasn't an issue for them, so to speak. So yeah, that is we only know what is reported, right? So that's kind of like the problem, is that there's all sorts of different things that will depend on exact setups. And at the same time, it's like, a ridiculous expectation for tournament organizers too, to have to like account for all the different things that players might have. This is almost bringing us back to years ago. There was a debate over whether or not we should have soundproof booths and how
this isn't even years ago. I think this is like because of that Zipnix clutch.
Oh yeah, it probably fired back
it's only,
up. Yeah.
Well, I guess it is a couple years ago now, but it's not like years and years ago. It's like, it's definitely a debate that's been had. Yeah. And I guess the reality is it's like, there's always going to be something unless you're hanging from the ceiling, floating in the air.
A gimbal. Suspend them on a gimbal.
Yeah. It's just like, it's not, I mean, I guess for a $2 million major, maybe.
It could happen. I just feel like I do see people's complaints from the perspective of like wanting to watch and be invested, because especially if you're there at LAN, there's like an element to it's actually obviously completely opposite to competitive integrity, but you want to be able to influence like the player in that sense. You want to be able to know that like, oh, he can't really hear you, but maybe he can see you wave and like support. And there's a good natured element to that. Whereas obviously some people can take that same mechanism and say, I'll just wave a sign that says A, and then hopefully he sees or whatever, like there could be all sorts of stuff like that. And it's obviously on to, event security and all that shit to make sure that doesn't happen and doesn't get out of control. But even just it happening once and then the guy's dismissed could be enough to turn some of these really close games, especially at the high level and especially with the current economy and map pool and all that.
There's also the reality of like, I think I've talked about this before. It's like, social media is really, I feel like, fuck things up like pretty hard in that nobody wants to be that. Flashpoint doesn't want to be the org where it's like, Flashpoint threw me out of the event because I was cheering for Astralis and they're a sweet. It is like the DreamHack thing with Fnatic, the Olaf pass. It's a Swedish event and they were favoring the Swedes. Like it's so easy for some random fucking pleb to basically just turn all of social media against a TO for something that's not their fucking fault, or like the TO is completely reasonable to kick this guy out, and they're just like they've gone to Reddit and turned the whole community against them. I feel like that concern in terms of adminning an event, I feel like that has to be at the forefront sometimes when it should be a non-issue. It should be something that optimally for competitive integrity you're never even considering.
E-League were pretty loose cannons, I think, from what I recall. From when you got like, what was it, ex-Navy SEAL security or some bullshit, some crazy like high-level security guys following around Richard Lewis. Like obviously at that point there's gonna be some people who get ejected, I think, just by nature of like they clearly put efforts into the security side of things. So, but yeah, it is an interesting and unique, in my opinion, sort of thing where like, with soccer or something, right, with football, you're not going to have a situation where like somebody holds up like some sort of card that like you can easily read. Like you could hold up the play if you somehow know the play that the other team is going for. Like, they're holding up an audible, but there's so many people in the stands. They're so far away. There's not like an instant like being able to look at that. There's nothing. I can't think of anything that you could do to influence like the strategic side or whatever of a professional sports game. And like, because there's that element of like physical exertion that happens and it's physical performance. Whereas in this case, like it would be like in an RTS game or something where you could like hold up like a live radar of your enemies somehow or something. Like if you could do something like that, even that's more complicated. Like, like you hold up the picture of the unit he's building or some shit and you haven't scouted that. That's like the only way I can think of like for another esport. Like I think shooters and specifically CS, since it has these big draws of the LAN crowds, are like the most susceptible to this kind of thing because it really can just be A or B and that can all be all you need. It's just two letters, right? So that's an interesting sort of struggle that hasn't really been in public consciousness, obviously, because we haven't had LANs for a while, but that will be an interesting one to see how this all goes through. And just one more thing to mark when we're returning to LANs, because there's obviously the positive side. We're getting back to LANs. We get that investment again. Feels like more legit results because you're having the competition tested at the highest level. But there's also those some ill-fated things. I guess. What do you think, Vu? Because do you feel like there's more bullshit you can do online? Like there's all sorts of shit you can do online, right? You can fuck with like the server selection. You can say, sorry, I'm getting lost.
The server selection has always been fucking completely ridiculous. Like this, I mean, there are a lot of TOs that just don't do it well. They choose geographically halfway between two teams, but they don't because you need it hard in the rules. Like because there's this idea that you need it really hard set in the rules, then you end up with this situation where it's just like it's not fair sometimes, and it really is tough for the TOs though. Like it really is tough for a TO to actually manage that like perfectly, because how do you make it fair? I think in like Valorant they had this idea that it's like, we're going to choose the closest ping, but everyone has to be over 40 or something. Like everyone has to be under 60, I think it was.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's the closest. There was some like line they drew that was really weird to me. But like, yeah, they've all got their different fucking shit. But I mean, I'm just going to say, I've said it before. I find it hard to believe that through the whole online era, all the coaches cheated, but not a single player loaded up some hacks once. Like,
oh really?
I feel like,
this is a take.
like, no, I said this before. It's like, I find it hard to believe like someone didn't do something. Sure, maybe.
I gotta say,
maybe they didn't.
Some of the players / teams can be like a real pain in the arse of that ping stuff, because sometimes like you can see a chat like, why is the match delayed? It's like because the 4 players have a 40 ping and one player's got 20 ping, so they want a different server and stuff like this, which is just unreasonable.
Sometimes it really is fucking ridiculous. Like,
yeah, it's pretty special. Like it's you're on the internet. You're not going to get a server where everyone's got the same ping, especially in North America. Fucking hell.
Yeah, good luck in North America. I get like 80 ping to some of my own fucking servers, so you're not going to get.
I have to say, like, it's insane playing Mythic League in America, and there'll be like a storm somewhere, and this guy just disappears. And he'll message like, "Oh, there's a storm in my area. I might not make it to the end of this match," and then just poof, he's gone. It's like something you don't normally see in Europe, but that's the internet varies so much in America. It's crazy.
I want to know I want to know more about this VU take about hacks and potential hacks.
I'm just saying, like, there's fucking like 40 coaches got banned for fucking coach bug abusing, and like there's not someone out there that's like come from kind of tier 3 that's like into like tried to get a leg up when everything's online. I just feel like the odds are higher that someone would have tried this shit than someone wouldn't. I don't think there's anyone specific that like comes to mind as like they're cheating. It's like, I mean, if you watch fucking Simple, dude, like you'd think everyone's fucking cheating. He's so fucking unbelievably good. It's like, how is this guy this good and I'm this bad and he's not cheating? Like, this is unfair, man. How's the world fair, dude? But fucking, I don't think anyone specifically. I'm just saying, like, surely someone should have got banned. Like, surely there's someone, man. Come on, like.
You never know about bugs though. At least, like,
yeah, bugs for sure.
Some really bizarre bugs which only got patched when like a YouTuber makes it available to everybody, like people keeping it on the down low in certain circles, and then he's like, all right, let me expose this to everyone, so then like Valve have got no choice but to fix it immediately. But you don't know if there are other bugs out there which 3 people know or something.
There's a couple of them that are like really well known. The few that are really well known that I'll say so people in chat know. Number 1, ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion. This is late 2000s. If you turned on ambient occlusion in your NVIDIA settings, you could see people on the other side of smokes, as if when you get that bug where sometimes a nade goes off and you can see their outline, like they're bright in the middle of the smoke. You could see through every smoke that was around for like a year and a half or 2 years, apparently in the late 2000s. Then there was the Molly one, where if you join a custom server with weird fucking mollies, I think it was zombie servers or some shit, then your mollies would hold over into normal games. That's one of the most common ones. There was ones with flashbangs back in source as well. There's just a shit ton of bugs, and until it comes out. But it also kind of, I mean, it doesn't segue into it, but it's also kind of how this OBS thing and this Reddit thing, with the Reddit responses. Apparently, if you put shit into your Windows directory, it is automatically whitelisted as far as trust factor goes. So if you put your OBS into your Windows directory, then you could stream OBS without having untrusted. Apparently this was well known for like a fucking year, and then someone made a Reddit post about it, and then it's immediately patched. It's like, come the fuck on.
That is ridiculous. So we could talk a little bit about this. This is obviously the thing that's towards the end in theory, but ultimately obviously has a massive implication for shit like this, because for my money anyway, there are so many more pressing things to address that are directly related to this very subject of having the element there where you have the opportunity to catch hackers or whatever. And on a code-based level, the fact that they refuse to like really dive into that and try to fix security. There was some security exploit from just a week ago that was posted to Reddit that literally allows people to like put keyloggers on your machine. It's like some like, have you been hacked? Like, old person ad that you get, like, oh no, maybe I've been hacked, but real though. Like CSGO can actually facilitate this shit depending on what custom servers you run into, right? So it's not something you're necessarily at risk in matchmaking. They patched that particular exploit out, but the stuff from joining any community server and unbeknownst to you, you've just been downloaded, so to speak. That stuff is pretty wild, and that they haven't addressed that. But then somebody writes a plugin and says, "Here's a way for you to not have the untrusted mode thing," which presumably I don't actually even know what that does. Does it lower your trust factor or something? I'm assuming. It does
well,
like
no,
that.
Technically it doesn't lower your trust factor. You better fucking watch out.
Oh, okay.
If you say it lowers your trust factor, you're gonna get shit on Reddit. All it does, it raises everyone else's trust factor.
Wow.
It's so different.
What the fuck?
I played a game of matchmaking.
Yeah.
And I had one guy on my team who seemed nice and was cooperative. So he, like you can invite people you played with even if they're not on your friends list.
Yeah.
So he invited me to another game. I was like, screw it, I'll play another game. And then he got banned for cheating at some point. And because I was in a party with him, my trust factor got lowered. For a while. So if I joined lobbies, it would tell other people, this person's got low trust factor because I was invited by a guy who wasn't even my friends. I got super fucked by that. That was really annoying, I have to say. But I do wonder, like in that post, he said that, the trust factor thing has been quite successful. But obviously for people playing, they won't perceive it that way. So I do wonder if it's like the lowest common denominator of cheats. Maybe that's a significant percentage, but then like what is the next level up? Because like in Europe, it's always there's like groups of German players who have cheats, which are mainly available in Germany. So whenever I play someone with a German flag, I'm like, no, he's cheating. But one of the posts in one of the two threads, because there was a thread leading to his post in the other thread, because it was like minus 300 or something. Someone said
1,500 when I saw it.
Yeah.
Someone linked to the programmer asking on Twitter about some, progress, some string or something. So I guess like the most painful part again is that lack of communication, which is in like some Valve Bible from many years ago, which I would hope would evolve in time when they can see, okay, the community is kind of not happy because we don't say anything at all ever, and it takes a long time for the results to come. Sometimes this being a clear example. So I think they are kind of shooting themselves in the foot in that regard. But same time, I hope that the devs don't get too much direct abuse, because I feel like so I mean this is just me guessing, but like one of the developers who no longer works at Valve, Matt Wood, I know that he used to, communicate with the community on Twitter and so on a basic level. They'll never say we're doing this or we're doing that, because they don't want to tell you they're doing something they might not deliver. But he would, communicate with people. But I remember he used to get, and other people as well, and I think just developers in general just get so much abuse from the community.
Yes, that is true.
I feel like part of the reason he left is probably because of that. And I don't know that for sure. I've never asked him directly. But I just feel that way. And, he was one of the guys who was responsible for, like, all the kind of law stuff we would get in the operations and things, which, they're more basic now than they used to be. So I do wonder if, like, the community abuse has negative impacts like that. But, yeah, I wish they would communicate more as well.
I can definitely imagine that's got it. I mean, if it doesn't negatively impact the mental, it's got to be. It's not a positive impact, right? These people are trying their best to help. I imagine it's outside of their control, that the communication type thing. I imagine that's like a company directive, and I imagine it does fucking suck, especially when it comes to the cheating thing and the trust factor thing. The people that get cheaters in their game are going to be incredibly vocal about it. Like I've been using untrusted since the start of Trust Factor, because I record, I can't use trusted essentially. And I don't get a whole lot of cheaters. I mean, I definitely do get more than 1 in 40 games, but maybe like 1 in 15, 1 in 20, something like that. I don't see very many blatant cheaters. I haven't had a spin botter, I think, since Trust Factor was released, and I've probably played a few hundred games since then. I've had people that are fucking borderline spin botting, but like nobody literally spin botting. And the thing is, I've got quite a few bans, but I'm not like super vocal about it, so nobody's gonna hear that. It's the people that get spin botters in every game, and I think there also is honestly, if I were a cheater, I would want to make Valve not want to communicate. Like I feel like there could be also an ulterior motive that people want Valve to like not think shit's working just because they're cheating, and then everyone wants to pile on and be like, look at this guy's absolutely true account. Now, matchmaking is completely fucked. I will say this. It's completely fucked. Okay, for different reasons in NA. But I don't think cheating is the biggest issue. I also think it's funny that James is talking about Germany. That's exactly how NA thinks of French Canadians. Like everyone thinks French Canadians are cheating every fucking time. It's every time, dude. Every time.
What do you think of so we've talked about the matchmaking specifically. Obviously, this is great. Like every time there's a thread that's like, matchmaking equals broken ? And then it's like, like 2 silvers again on a team, and the other team has like 3 globals or some insane shit. Like, what is even happening? Every time that happens, it must be great PR for FACEIT. So I'm curious as to what you think of this whole situation, James.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of people playing on FACEIT. So sometimes you get those weird games, especially because in the recent operation they basically split the queue. With the Broken Thang Premier thing, so you'd get more skewed ranks. But it's a question of liquidity, isn't it? The lower liquidity you have, the more variance you're going to get in the ranks, essentially. And so they kind of messed up there. I mean, I guess there was an experiment part of it, but I suppose it's like short-term pain for long-term gain in the. I know they've now made that Premier mode available to everybody.
Yeah, I think so, of course, temporarily, maybe. I'm not sure. Like, it does seem a little bit out of the woods from them, out of left field.
Yeah, so they definitely you can see the queue times are longer than they used to be, and they split the queue into 2 different pieces, whatever sizes they are. So that's gonna make that a lot worse. So we'll see what happens in the next operation. But lots of people are playing on FACEIT, so that's also part of it.
It also seems really dumb from Valve, just as like, it almost seems like they don't want the game to be successful when you basically make the game unplayable for streamers, which is, streamers do bring people to the game. If a streamer's having a good time, people are going to want to play with them. They're going to want to play the game a little bit more. That's like part of what Valorant tried to capitalize on with their beta, is to try and bring people in. And the game is fucking unplayable if you play with no trust or with allow third-party software, because it didn't used to happen, but it'll kick you from your party every time you try and queue. It also, if you minimize now, it goes, oh, are you trusted? And it does it like between every game. It's like, dude, just ask me once when I start the game. Like, can you not just let me fucking play? Like, they're just making it unplayable. It's actually ridiculous.
That is
the timing of that is terrible. I'm lucky enough that I have a 2 PC setup. Thank you, Intel. Otherwise, I'd be completely effed by that. And I don't think I'd even understand how to do it. So my restarting is like disabling FACEIT anti-cheat, essentially, so I can do whatever missions and so on. But you have to. I feel like there are things like if you look at Mirage, for example, I think like Mirage is the most popular map in the map pool, right?
Yes.
And I think if you were to remove a Mirage, I think you have a question on what the impact of that would be on the casual game, the casual base, because you have to think about like their uptake of a new map and the complexity of that map and so on. So I think like those maps with the big simple channels like mid and so on, well, simple in terms of it's a big space, right? It's not like an overpass or something. Whereas it looks a lot more complicated, but just basic shit, basic stuff for a basic bitch, right? You kind of need that for your casual user base. But so I think there's that's definitely a consideration on if they remove that and the impact and so on. But I think the same approach needs to be had with things like this. I mean, we don't know the numbers and how much of an impact it's stopping cheaters. If you do Overwatch, you see spin botters all day, but you don't know what percentage of the user base are being exposed to those spin bosses and so on. So it's hard to judge with complete information, but especially with a game which is kind of like a copy of your game with its own take on top. Like the timing is absolutely terrible, where you're limiting the visibility of your own game.
Yes.
When people are like fleeing essentially in other directions.
Well, that's another element too of CSGO in general, is that streaming never really was massive, in my opinion, compared to other games, like, for example, League of Legends, which is another popular esport. Like, the amount of people who played casually, and then the percentage of those that also watched streams, that was way higher than people who watched like official tournaments or whatever. And part of that is probably due to the fact that there's just less of those in League. There's obviously everything is like controlled from top down by the gods themselves. But when you have something like CS, where most people, I don't know if this is still a true statistic, because obviously it's surged in player base recently. Somehow, despite everything Valve has not done, there are more players. But the fact that
thank you, China.
Yeah, it's one of those situations, I think, where I don't think there were that many people that were playing versus the many people who were watching. I think there was some weird skew there, where there were maybe not more people watching than playing, but a lot of people were specifically watching, like, obviously their favorite players, but also the tournaments themselves, and maybe not playing nearly as frequently as they watched, we'll say. So like the ratio of time spent, a lot of it was on websites like Twitch and I guess YouTube for any of partnered streams there. But for the most part, it was just on Twitch. A lot of people who were interested in Counter-Strike were interested because they were watching a stream. And as Vu points out, like, if you cut that out in any capacity, if you fuck with that in any respect, it's going to really affect the bottom line, the player counts, the interest in general, the mind share, so to speak, for the game, particularly when, as you pointed out there, James, the fact that Valorant just comes into the space, it's like, oh, we have some of these problems, but most of them are like, it's a different look. You got some different things to check us out with. And like, again, best time possible, because at this point, Valve is once again kind of, at least publicly, they seem to be asleep at the wheel, even if they are doing something behind the scenes that they're just not communicating about. And I think, to your point about Mirage, I think one of the major reasons why Mirage is still so popular, maybe one of the reasons why it has not actually been removed yet, is because it is the simplest map from a performance standpoint. So really, really bad computers can run it at a reasonable frame rate, where that used to be Dust 2, then that got reworked, and that's on to Mirage. I think maybe that's actually, I mean, I don't know, I can only speculate, but if I'm a game developer and I can't figure out how to make a map or pick a map that has really good optimization, I probably wouldn't want to remove Mirage, because that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people who don't have the best computers can still play the game officially in a matchmaking environment, which does drive a lot of interest in that sense. So yeah, there's a ton of problems facing, I think, the casual base specifically, that you're probably going to continue to run into, unfortunately, unless Valve does decide to opt into a little bit more of a, I would just say, like, an involved development. It doesn't have to be anything massive. I've theory crafted what I would want somebody to do if they decided to come in as like commissioner of the casual base or something like that, like where they are trying to make a really involved couple of steps towards improving the game for the casual player base and making it more desirable to play. I don't think operations where you are paying for an opportunity to grind useless tasks, like throwing the same smoke on Mirage stairs over and over again, like they did in the last operation, and killing chickens in deathmatch like they did in this operation, I don't think that's the way to engage the casual player base personally. Maybe it did really well. I don't know. But that's just one of those things that never really personally spoke to me. And it seemed like people were just unhappy doing them too. They were like, I have to do this for some reason.
It was a grind. Yeah. It was a grind. But I think, like, if I had to lay out that many missions for that amount of time, I'd have to really sit down and think about like how I could improve them. And at that point, I'd want money for it as well.
Sure.
But to touch on the performance issues, I think Counter-Strike's in a weird spot where, if you look at the newer games that are coming out, if you look at like an Overwatch or a Valorant, I think in terms of like the problems with FPS, right, people are like, okay, violence and killing humans essentially. So they'll make things cartoony. But I think, or like Space Age or whatever, but I think the advantage of having like cartoony graphics is that you can play with color and have pop and stuff. But Counter-Strike, technical graphics aside, has always been like realism, buildings, walls, like real places, but that it's hard to iterate on that without having more demand. Whereas like, Valorant's been able to have more of a, I don't think basic's the right word, but because it's like
more stylized,
it's not going
simple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they could play with colors and so on, and they don't have to kind of have that realism. Like if Counter-Strike went that way, it'll be super weird. So I think they're kind of between a rock and a hard place in that respect.
That's a point. I mean, we've both, I guess all three of us in some ways, but maybe Vu less so. We've all taken a look at some custom maps from people who are submitting them to things like Mapcore and the Faceit Mapcore Hub and stuff. One of the things that I am repeatedly sort of harping on in my videos for those where I do see something that like almost borders on maybe a little bit fantastical or a little bit very different, more stylized, is I'm like, I always wonder why there aren't more of this. And I wonder how much of that is due to, this might surprise people. It surprised me when I started interviewing mappers, but Valve communicates very, very regularly with mappers, with people who, even if they haven't even gotten a map accepted into the game, they are very tight knit with those guys. And like, not in the sense that they're going to talk about them casually like friends, but they communicate with those guys way more than they communicate with anybody in esports, to my knowledge anyway. And the fact that they have like consistent feedback where they'll give you like a write up on what they want from your map or what they want to see changed or whatever. Like the fact that happens, you can tell that people are actually passionate.
Then how do we get fucking vertigo?
Exactly. So that's my next point. Why do we have vertigo in the map pool, Vu? I just feel like, in general, this map is probably like very clearly somebody who wanted vertigo to succeed walked through and essentially by fiat decided it was going to be a competitive map. As somebody who's most focused on esports or more interested in competitive games, I find it very sinful, personally, like disgusting in a way, that competitive careers have been decided based on really bad map design. And the fact that they have so many, like, basically it was almost like a cargo cult CSGO map in a way. And I mean this in terms of its construction. I don't even care about the fact that you can fall down. I think that's kind of goofy, but okay, you want to give your map this almost gimmick, so to speak. They don't even really deliver on the theme. It's not even like you can make some high skill jumps to like go on like a crane that's got like some cargo hanging off the side or whatever.
There was a 5-man boost I saw the other day that was actually wicked. There was one.
Okay, so maybe there's very, very minimal and not very accessible, right? But
let me say, I think this is my chance to go off on Valve. That
Here we go.
It's really like they don't fucking touch the game, dude. It's like they don't play the game. And the moment that Mirage was brought up, I am reminded of the fact that there was a gap in triple boxes since Mirage was released.
Yes.
Everyone knew it. You could always look through it. It was never a big fucking thing. Someone gets a kill through it in a pro game, it gets to the top of Reddit, and they fix it. Have they not fucking played the game? Like, anyone that plays the game knew that shit existed for fucking years. And the fact that they just only now fix it is concerning in that it shows that they don't play the game. The same thing with the Revolver ever being released in its initial state. You could touch that thing for 30 seconds and you knew it was fucking busted. It's like they don't play the game. And I think the same thing goes with the map design in that they keep trying to force T-sided maps. I think they think that T-sided maps, there should be some CT-sided and some T-sided and some even. And I know there are pro players that also echo that same sentiment, but it doesn't fucking work in the way the game is balanced. The game is balanced for a CT-sided map because when you're a T-side and you're down in rounds, you have a very clear linear way of getting back into the game. You get a few bomb plants, you damage their economy, then you win a round, you break their economy, and you can get some rounds, you can string some together, and you can give yourself a real chance into a half. The game is not functioning correctly for T-sided maps. When a CT-sided map happens, again, you have that wave back in. When a T-sided map happens, how are the CTs supposed to build together to get a round back? They're constantly put back on eco. The T-side economy is constantly being built through winning anti-ecos. They don't have to waste as much utility on their anti-ecos because they have the initiative. They know where they want to fucking go. They don't have to have everyone have guns. They can have, kind of a broken buy and still get things done because they have the initiative. T-sided maps are inherently imbalanced unless they want to change the way the economy works. And T-sided maps, I would love to see the data on this, because they are based on purely thinking about it from a logical perspective. T-sided maps are going to be extremely swingy based on how the first gun round or the pistol round and the first gun round go. Because if you get up 5-0 basically on T side, the CT side is in an almost unwinnable position, it feels like, because you can't work your way back into the half. And they keep forcing out these T-sided maps that are just, nobody's gonna fucking like them. Nobody's gonna play that. It's gonna feel like shit. They're not even gonna be sure why, and then they're gonna fucking hate it. It's really, I feel like that they keep forcing T-sided maps, and it's actually tilted me since the start.
What do you make of this one, James? Because you've obviously casted plenty of Vertigo, and you've also had the unique experience, perhaps amongst talent, to actually take a look into what the up-and-coming maps could be, what maps could be replacing Vertigo, or even other maps that in that sense. So, like, do you agree with the general take on this talk show so far, that Vertigo is just junk and we should jettison it?
So I have been vocal about Vertigo. I've tried to like start discussions about that on Twitter, because how I look at the map, like we've seen, I want to say, I think MSL and cadiaN separately have said like they find Vertigo, stimulating, and I can understand that because it's a different approach to a map. It's not the same as other maps, so I get that. I don't have a problem with that. But my view of it is that, like, what is for me the priority for me is that it needs to be a map which is stimulating to watch. And before the more recent iterations, if you looked at the mid, for example, I felt like there wasn't really a mid to fight for. Like, there wasn't, the shape of the map didn't really have like a back and forth you could have, and they've made adjustments to that so you can fight for area a bit more. But like, I think one of the biggest issues is if you look at the verticality of the A bomb site.
Yeah,
it doesn't have, it's weird because, like, in some situations, like you're on a bomb site or you're not really pushing towards a bomb site in a horizontal plane. So we're constantly seeing that, like, lots of smokes on the bomb site, lots of spray as the bomb's getting planted, lots of spray as people are trying to defuse the bomb, which looks like, I think if you're watching it, for me as a viewer, all I see is variance. People are spraying smokes and people are dying.
Yeah.
And it feels very repetitive. And I think that's not good for the game from a, like, why do I want to watch that again and again? It's like, oh, Vertigo again, I'm just expecting to see that. And you'll see, some aggressions from the CTs on the ramp and so on. But I think like the lack of horizontal plane towards the bomb sites, more so the way the A bomb site is at the moment, I think makes it a bad map to watch. And I think that's a big issue. And it's the same, like, you constantly see these threads from people on Reddit about Cobblestone saying, like, it's almost every week at the moment, like, oh, I miss Cobblestone. And for me, I'm like, I don't understand why you'd miss watching Cobblestone, because, I mean, sure, you'd have some, JW aside, right, because he's a unicorn.
Sure.
I feel like there's a lot of, like, waiting around smokes and so on, and it's stuff that you can see on different maps. And there are some cool moments, like NIP with the Mag 7 on a very early stage of the map. I think the map design at that point was dog shit, though. And yeah, there were some cool moments, but, like, I think in an ideal world, they don't necessarily happen. And there's always going to be growing pains with how a map first comes into figuring out, okay, this doesn't work so well, let's change it. It's just, I don't think there's another way to do it. I mean, obviously there's some extreme examples where you could say, okay, this is bad. But it's always going to have to grow. But I think Vertigo has some, essentially, I want to say unsolvable problems, but I guess you could always just have some crazy extension to the A bomb site, but I don't know how it would realistically work. So again, I think they've tried to, like, I would essentially agree. Like, I just don't think from a spectator point of view for an esport, I don't think it's a good map. And yeah, I do playtest maps, upcoming maps of Mapcore pretty much every week. I like to try and give as much to the community as possible. So I'm always helping them playtest maps, mostly 5v5 maps, danger zone maps as well, sometimes the odd wingman maps. So I've seen a shitload of maps which are, like, coming up the pipeline. It's difficult to see how something would play out, though.
Sure, yeah.
There's an interesting map to me called Mocha in its design. It's basically based on, like, a coffee factory, and I think, like, it's got a good balance in terms of graphics and performance. The setting is amazing. The question is just like how it would play out, but I don't know. But we've seen Canals come out from Valve. We've seen Ancient come out from Valve,
Yeah.
and I've had brief conversations with them at majors about, I suppose, you can release a new map, put it in an operation or something, but really you've got to force it down people's throats to see what you can really do with it, if it can be competitive. And I don't know if all these maps, their intention was for them to go into, like, potentially go into the map pool, or if that was just some more flavor to the overall game. But I do wonder why, like, we have all these maps come from the community, but outside of like Cash, how many really make it into the map pool? And it's fair enough if they're planning something themselves, but again, we see releases from them which then don't go into the map pool. So I'm not sure in that respect what it is they want or what it is they're looking for, but I would be sad if there wasn't a map change after this major, at least.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
I'm hopeful for Tuscan. Tuscan.
It's got literally the best map. Like, I'll just say it. It's got the best mapper behind it. Cat Food is like the legit guy. He's made
I've never heard that guy.
Well, yeah. So he's made Ruby, which was added to the game. He's made Engage, which is in the game right now. A lot of people will criticize some of the layout stuff. In that case, Engage wasn't even his layout, but he will put in the time to correct things afterwards or optimize things or change things. And he's got like ideas that he actually has ideas. Like when you play a map from him and there's somebody who put thought into stuff, which isn't always the case when you're playing user-generated content. So this guy, like, he's got the work ethic, he's got the history. He's one of the very few level designers who hasn't moved on to, even though he's done like stuff for other game development firms, he hasn't moved on to a full-time position as somebody else's level designer for some company, where a lot of the promising talents in the level design community do eventually move on. They get picked up, and maybe that was their goal the whole time. Maybe it was just circumstance. You can't really blame them for them, obviously. But it does mean that we often have this sort of like rotation out, this revolving door of people learning to do it, doing a good map or two, and then getting, moved on before they can really create a magnum opus. And I feel like Cat Food is pretty good at like just continuously reinventing himself in that respect.
I think it can be lucrative to get maps into the operations as well. So I think there's a big incentive these days. I have actually played another map that he has in the pipeline with. The good thing about him is that he's not afraid to do something bold.
Yeah,
and
you're talking about Hydra. Right?
he doesn't about cat foods. Oh, sorry, that might be the name of the map.
Yeah,
I know he ran it past pros before, but like, and he doesn't like fold to criticism too quickly either, which I think is good, even if I don't always agree with certain things. So I think that's good.
Yeah, and I mean that's the kind of thing for me is that like, so you talked earlier about what does Valve want to do? How do they want to do it? We talked about Canals, Ancient. I really wouldn't like Ancient in the map pool, not just because I don't think it's a good map, but also because I think it's too similar layout-wise to a lot of other maps that have been or currently are. I think there's a lot of similarities between it and the way that Mirage, for example, is played, at least with the way that T's actually try to take terrain. And for me, like, I guess if Mirage is on the way out, maybe you can make an argument. Obviously, Mirage took inspiration from Dust 2 with its initial layout, even though it is obviously played a little bit differently. I just feel like anything at this point would be better than Vertigo. And if Vertigo is not the map that gets removed, then I really don't, like, I already don't know what Valve are doing, but I really don't know what Valve are doing at that point. And when we see, like, I think you bring up the A ramp thing. That's obviously where everybody goes. It's like if you had to take Nuke, A site, but you didn't have lobby, like you couldn't go through lobby. That's what Vertigo really is to me. It's like you always have to go outside. Like, okay, you always go this way. Like nobody's ever going to go mid, even though in theory you could go mid, and like some teams eventually do go mid. But like unless it's some gimmick strat where you can like, it would be the equivalent of like trying to, I can't even think of like an example right now. It would be like if you had some way to access like some really back alley area, and the only reason you succeed is because somebody's not there to look for you because nobody would expect it. That's essentially the idea. Is like CT sort of have to watch it, but not really. And then all of the engagements happen around spam smokes and like things that are just really bad for storytelling on a broadcast, for making a narrative. And as a sort of up and coming caster myself, I guess I'll be generous to myself. As an up and coming caster myself, when I'm trying to do some color for a Vertigo match, it's just like, well, here they are in the spots that they were preordained. Here they are. This is where they must go every round. And like, I can make fun of it because that's kind of my thing is every time we're playing on Vertigo, I just talk about how bad the map is instead of casting the game. But aside from that, like most people are not going to be able to pull out some sort of really magical storyline. And if it does rely on what will essentially feel a lot like luck, even though the players have studied up where the positions are to spam and the lineups and all this, they go really deep and they figure out like, here's the nade lineups, here's the spam lineups, here's where I have to position myself for a retake or whatever. And for trying to like spam the CTs that are diffusing. But it's played out the same exact way for so long. Even if it does actually lead to some tense moments, it's not like organic excitement. It's almost empty calories as a viewer. And maybe that's a unique perspective that we have as people who are really embedded into the scene. But I feel like the average viewer will also be able to sort of subconsciously maybe think about that too, is like, well, I'm not as excited for a Vertigo retake that I've seen a million times. I'm more excited for a map that I've seen more than Vertigo, like Mirage or Dust 2, because there's actually more gameplay to be had there. There's more skill-based gameplay where people are actually looking at each other when they shoot instead of being smoked off. So there's a lot to unpack with Vertigo, I guess. But did you have any thoughts on Vertigo? Did you have any final words?
Yeah, I mean, I know you sent me a cast on Vertigo, and my response was basically like, yeah, Vertigo's, in my opinion, Vertigo's very hard to cast because it's hard. I feel like Vertigo, it's hard to sometimes know where contact is going to happen early enough that you can really see it coming and really build up to it. I don't know, maybe James has an opinion on this because don't pretend that I'm amazing, but I think when you're casting, you want to basically build up to the contact, and you want to have it, fans see it coming basically by the way you're hyping the moment. I feel like Vertigo is very hard to see that. A ramp, you always have some type of contest, but there's 2 feet between I'm attacking you in A ramp and I'm not attacking you in A ramp at the very beginning of the round. It just feels like it's really hard to have a really well flowing cast on that map as opposed to other maps. And I'll also throw in percentage wise, by the way, it is literally percentage wise. At least I did these averages like 3-4 months ago. 90% or 88%, I think, A side opens. It's literally A side opens so much that you just only go the other way because you don't want them to stack A. It's just like that can't be a good map.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a very challenging map to make compelling content in compared to other maps. And again, I think one of the strongest things you can do as a commentator is build expectation for the viewer, where they kind of go on their own journey. And I think like journey of discovery for them, if you set an expectation and then they see it happen, and it goes one way or another for team A or team B, it's like one of the best things you can do for a viewer. But it is indeed difficult to do that. And again, when it's like so much spraying through the smoke as well, it's like, how do you like keep a certain level of tension depending on what the meaning of the round is, if it's like a late round, etc. And it's just the usual spray that you've seen like 12 rounds prior.
Yeah.
That's also another challenge in itself. Like, why is it exciting this time? It can be a problem.
What would be exciting, as somebody points out in the chat, is if Valve put a hostage map into the activity. Have you guys? Has anybody here actually played much hostage? Before I get into this, because this is a dead tirade. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, but I have some.
Dude,
words.
I'm a beast. I'm a beast at Office. I will shit on people on Office.
The Office gang, the global Office gang. What about you, Vu? Are you an Office player?
I mean, everyone that played Source in 1.6 has played a whole lot of CS Assault, but I haven't played any in CSGO except for the times I've forgotten to click off Office when for some reason all the maps are on the fucking pool.
Yeah, that's the
Agency is really fun as well. I think a lot of people really enjoy Agency. Obviously, that's casually.
Sure, yeah.
But it is a lot. It is a lot of fun. It's one of the ones which is kind of stands out on its own versus all the other, or most of the other hostage maps that have been in operations and such.
The hostage stuff for me is like, it's basically like if you took this economy that we have in professional level CS or just in regular competitive on diffuse maps, and you made it even more nightmarish. That's kind of what the hostage stuff is, because you have the CTs are the aggressors, but most of the map design isn't like incredibly like aggressor friendly, we'll say. Like normally it would be T-sided or whatever. It's not attack friendly, we'll say. The CTs are the attackers, but they've got more expensive equipment, and they don't get nearly as much of like a breathing room, economically speaking, by rescuing, or I guess picking up a hostage would be the equivalent to a bomb plant. So it usually, I think you have to make something really interesting with the map design in order to make that a solvable environment. But I also almost feel like you need like some sort of change to the economy for that to be facilitated. And it's just one of those things that's been uncharted. But I will say, it's sort of tangentially related, I was actually kind of excited in a weird way for Danger Zone esports. That has not taken off at all. But when they released Danger Zone, before they had all of the, they added like the riot shield and bump mines and stuff. When they had a little, it was like in its early stages, there was a major, I think it was at the most recent IEM Katowice, where they had they had a show match going, and I think it was Moses and Vince who were casting it. And I thought they, like, obviously this is the first time anybody has casted a Danger Zone match. I thought it was actually really interesting the way that it shaped up. You'd have to do, there's obviously some difficult to solve problems with casting like any sort of battle royale, but I feel like the fact that it was brought to me in a CSGO format, like CSGO flavor, was pretty interesting. I know you've played a bit of Danger Zone, James, so maybe you have some comments on this. Do you think it's actually viable for like, even if it's just a casual thing?
When that event was going on, I was like the only person championing Danger Zone. But people see the light now. I'm the fucking OG king of Danger Zone. It's so much fun. I think initially the issue was that people expected it to be like a standalone battle royale, and they're comparing it to other battle royales. But that's not. I don't think that was ever what it was supposed to be. It's like a side game for Counter-Strike. It's not something you should compare to like PUBG or something like that.
Sure.
And I think it's so much fun from a streamer POV because like, you know, I would normally queue solo. Like it's easy. Like most people don't know to use bump mines and so on. So you could get lots of awesome kills and it's a lot of fun to play. But I would like do things where I'd play solo and be like, okay, if the first box I open is a USP, I'm going to try and win the game only with a USP and stuff. Okay. So I think like from a streamer POV, you can make it really entertaining. And obviously I always have disasters whenever I'm playing Counter-Strike, which people have fun. But from a like, I think what's good about that is like if you think about like show matches at majors, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, like either it's Mirage or something. I mean, there was an era where people would be tryharding and it was just super dry to watch. Mm-hmm. But now people aren't shy to have some fun, and I think with the right characters, you can have some fun. But where it's like a new map and it's a show match, it can be pretty dry because people might not know their way around, or if it's like a map from an older version of the game and it's a bit different here, you know, it's like not as entertaining as it could be, basically, and you're not really learning much by watching it. But I think Danger Zone is a simple enough format that you could have a lot of fun with that. Depending on how busy you are at an event, I mean the teams and so on, you could do like a side event that you could just like people have to enter, for example. Because like with fighting games, right, there would normally be, I guess by default it would be like a 1v1, but you might have like a 5v5 side tournament. So this would be like that in reverse. We'd have like a 2v2 tournament, and that could be really fun and entertaining, especially people flying around, cratering, failing to knife each other and so on. I think there's a lot of fun you could have with that for sure. Getting scouts, people camping and ratting, like you could have a lot of fun with that for sure. Yeah.
What do you think of Danger Zone, Vu? You big fan?
I've never played it for even 2 seconds. I've watched some of Rush's clips on it. It seems pretty cool, but
would you watch a Danger Zone professional tournament or a side tournament? Would that be of interest?
I'd probably tune in for like 5 minutes and be like, "Wow, that was interesting," and then probably not watch the whole thing. To be honest, like I'm just being honest here. It's not because I think it's a shit game mode. It's just that
it's not grabbed you.
You know,
it's not for you.
I play CS, and that's pretty much it. And Danger Zone is tangentially CS. It's kind of CS.
Yeah. They do change a lot of things. Like I think they made it so that Molotovs don't time out and grenades deal more damage. They've actually made some game state changes, which in a way it's like, oh cool, they've tailored it for this game mode. But in another way, it's like, this is very inconsistent and I am confused. So I feel like for Danger Zone, you have to opt into it a few, like consistently. Otherwise you are just going to be like kind of confused with
do you know what I like about Danger? One of the things I find most attractive about Danger Zone, right, is that like one of my problems with CS, like I'm not a mad fragger, okay? I need to play team Counter-Strike. If it's like everybody's just going around being a pleb and I've got to just outfrag everybody every round, I might do that half the time. I just don't have that strong enough aim to do that. So I get frustrated a lot when people are doing dumb stuff, and I think like Danger Zone allows me to play Counter-Strike without raging at people or getting frustrated. Yes. So I can play what I love without being so invested in it in a competitive way that I would be in, you know, playing 5v5 and then just getting upset. So that is a help for me. ELO Hell does exist, but it does.
Sorry, if you go ahead.
I was just saying ELO Hell does exist. Every time you say it doesn't, I'm like, it fucking does!
There it is.
I mean, the one thing I've actually heard from a streaming perspective, I think Summit might have said this, where basically it's like CS is one of the games where it's incredibly tough to play CS, to stream CS unless you're really good at it.
Yeah.
If you're not really good at it, then you're gonna struggle to make an entertaining stream, because it's just you're just going to be getting destroyed. And at least in like League of Legends, for example, you can have games where you do well anyways, CS is just like really intensive, and if you're not good, you're probably not streaming very entertainingly, which is why I would imagine that's why pretty much all the semi-big CS streamers are all really fucking good at the game. And Danger Zone might be a way to kind of, make an entertaining stream without that level of frustration, and, without being necessarily like a top tier player,
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
People like to see me fail as well, and I do plenty of that. But like with normal CS, I'll think out loud. So if I've died, I'll try and think like, why did I die? I think I might have messed up here, blah, blah, blah. But if I see someone at the level I'm playing is doing something wrong, I'll say like, all right, this guy's doing this, and could consider these options and so on. But I don't know, some people get butthurt about that for some reason, like the viewers. I just don't understand it. But there we go.
There's always all of those little things that will trigger you in a minor way, obviously. Like when you stream enough, you're bound to see some like the same behaviors pop up, of course. Like the backseat gamers, or the backseat thinkers, and in that case where they're like, you can't think that about your player or whatever, they get angry. that is a bit of a different flavor of man, I think, to comment that. But what I'll say there was a point that was brought up that obviously like reminds me of a point I was making to like in private a couple of conversations ago, where I was discussing the Dota versus CS angle. Does anybody here play Dota 2 by any chance?
I've never played a MOBA in my life.
Okay, that's respectable. What, and you nodded.
I played a lot of League of Legends. Okay. A friend of mine tried to get me into Dota, but it was hard to switch. I think it's one of those things where it's like I had an expectation what comes out of a MOBA, and Dota was so different from League that it was just extremely frustrating. I only played probably like 5 or 10 games.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where a lot of people. I haven't played much Dota myself, and the main reason isn't really related to the game itself. It's just like I'm not really a massive fan of MOBAs anymore. But an interesting comparison that keeps being brought up is like, oh, Valve gives more attention to Dota than they do to CS. And I guess I haven't heard this kind of line of logic as much recently, because obviously Valve hasn't been paying that much attention to Dota, apparently, if you swim in those circles. They did a moderate scale update recently, but there had been a massive lull point. So that kind of point of comparison wasn't available anymore. They couldn't bring that up as an argument nearly as easily and justify it. But I do feel like there is an element of, like, I can only speculate. I haven't worked at Valve, obviously. I haven't been there. I haven't talked to them. But it does feel like when you walk into your company and the guy who's like the literal lord and savior of the whole company, Gabe Newell, is like, hi guys, my favorite game is Dota 2. I play Dota 2 all day. And then you're like, oh, I will work on Dota 2. Like, it's kind of a natural sort of, I guess, flow chart of like why something would happen, cause and effect. And then if you see like very little attention to CS by the same degree, or to the same degree, it does feel like maybe they have put in some more effort recently. They've done like operations, obviously, but they've also made some reports or news posts about like, here's some things we believe about like the professional scene. We're announcing RMRs again. We like making rulings on coaches and stuff that is related to esports, directly linked to esports, instead of just being like, oh, here's an operation or here's some content or whatever, which they didn't do that much of anyway. So I don't know if this argument still really does hold much water, or if it really was ever true, but it does feel like there's an element of neglect that the CSGO community generally feels. And I feel like maybe this is compounded by the fact that, obviously, as we mentioned before, Valve doesn't do much communication. And if they do any communication, they do get minus 2K upvotes on Reddit, which I'm sure Mick John is feeling very, very sad about right now. So that is certainly a case that can happen. Do we think that, like, has Valve sort of turned over some sort of new leaf in this respect? I guess that's kind of the essence of my question here, or my thought process is they still do receive the same level of vitriol, I think, from the fans. They still get this, like, you haven't fixed this problem. And to many respects, like, that is correct. Like, this is a rare Reddit moment with this whole John guy and talking about closing the loophole. It's a rare Reddit moment where I agree with Reddit in general. Like, obviously, some of the points anyway, I'll qualify that. But in general, like, I'm on kind of a similar boat. Like, why are you directing so much attention to this instead of, like, I guess maybe this is an easy problem to fix, but surely there's, like, other things that should be fixed that are adjacent to or identical to this exact issue. So like, where's the focus? And we don't have communication. The only communication you give us is that you're focusing on this seemingly very small thing instead of all of the large things. So there's still some water held by the complaints against Valve, but it does feel like they have been doing a little bit more recently. And I wonder if this is like just because of Valorant or just because of like X factor, like, oh, maybe it's time for the annual CSGO update, or if there's maybe a deeper trend that we might be missing in the online era side of things.
CSGO doesn't have an Ice Frog, I think is the most obvious thing.
Enough.
I think Ice Frog is someone that really cares about Dota. I know some people don't like exchanges. There's been, I haven't looked into what exactly has gone on recently that's made people really unhappy with the state of the game. But I think, if CS had an Ice Frog, probably people would feel like CS is a lot more similar to Dota, because part of the problem is a lot of the fucking changes that Valve makes in CS are just completely boneheaded.
Well, they don't play the game, as you mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah, for example, the R8, the 1.5 days where the AUG was a laser beam that shot like 1,000 rounds per minute or whatever,
zero recoil.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like they make these changes that clearly signify they don't play the game.
Don't
and
even
I also
really test
think
it
that,
either, yeah.
Yeah, I also think that it hurts that that CS is a game that probably numbers, like basically balanced by numbers, is probably a little bit less effective as opposed to a MOBA, especially a MOBA where, as far as I understand, I think pro players still play in Dota like queues, don't they? Or do they have a face it type thing?
I think, there's probably something, but maybe James knows this better than I do. I'm pretty sure most people still use matchmaking, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
there's face it for Dota.
Is there? Okay.
But
yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't go and say where the pros
numbers,
play because I don't play Dota and I'm not involved in it. So
yeah, well, I imagine it's also bigger that there's an actual, like, it's harder to cheat in a MOBA as well, I think, compared to CS. So anti-cheats would probably be less significant. But I think not having Ice Frog, and also I think in MOBAs, balance by numbers probably works a little bit more effectively.
Valve do love their data, as we've come to know.
For me, I think the comparison that people make doesn't make sense to me, because like when they're saying, they care more about Dota and so on, I think like for me, I consider them separate companies under the umbrella of Valve. So it's like, I think it's interesting the point you make about, Gabe loves Dota, let me work on Dota. Yep. That could be a thing. But aside from that, I feel like they're completely separate entities, essentially. Like they just don't really relate to each other. So when they say like Valve, does more on this one than that one, it's like this team, which is probably, I don't know if it's bigger or not, but this team here is putting out more than this team over here. And, I'm not like Defense Force or something. I think in part, Counter-Strike, let's look at missions, for example. Like I also play, there's not many games I play at any one time, because I feel like when you play a lot of CS, you don't really have room to play a lot of other games. But one thing I do play is Apex. And I think so in Apex, you have like daily missions, you've got weekly missions, and maybe monthly missions as well. And like there's the daily missions, even if you don't like the one you get, you can use some of your like XP points in the game to shuffle it a few times to get a different one. And that might be like get 3 kills as Caustic, do 400 damage with the R301, stuff like that. But I think like because Counter-Strike's more of a strict game, I think you have more limited scope in what you can do with the game. So I think different types of games like a Battle Royale and so on have so many other things that are available to them. But, again, I feel like comparing one to the other is kind of unfortunate in that I don't really think there's too much relevance there. But again, one issue is that we're so in the dark because of the lack of communication as well, that they're not like entirely innocent either in that respect. Like things could be better. I do wonder if they appointed someone in Counter-Strike. I mean, at least I agree with you in that there are some clear indicators that people aren't playing at a reasonable level. Like when the R8 came, I was in hysterics. I was playing matchmaking with Henry G and someone else. We were just one-shotting people on Banana of Inferno. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And again, the thing with the org, where at one point it literally had no recoil, and it's like, this is like, how is this in the game for more than 25 minutes? And things like this, and maybe like basic stuff like this, which should never happen, could be avoided. But at the same time, I think if they appointed someone like that in Counter-Strike, regardless of those things not happening, I think that person is still going to get crucified for people wanting things which maybe the devs don't want to deliver, or I don't know. I think like it may fix some things, but I think that person just becomes a funnel of abuse as well. So it's not ideal. Like there's downsides by the way, but yeah,
I think they would have to.
The comparison is the problem.
They would have. I think they'd have to really actually adjust the way they balance the game if they wanted to. I think there's definite problems in balancing the game the way Valve does, which really is, for all I can tell, it's really based very, very heavily on the numbers. I use the example with the Krieg a lot. Everyone knew it was completely busted. People weren't changing because it was so broken, but it was still only half the kills of the AK around the time people were like, "Oh, balance is a nerf is going to come soon," and it's like the nerf's not going to come until you have an event where it's out killed the AK, and they had an event where it out killed the AK. They finally got a nerf. There's positives to that. Like there are definite positives to that because a lot of the times you see pros really just they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to balance. They won't give anything a chance until it's in the pro scene. It's just there are benefits to it and there are negatives, but I think one of the biggest negatives is that the community will always complain that changes aren't made fast enough and things aren't done the way they want. Whereas, if you have someone responding, all he's gonna be able to say is we're aware, we're working on it. You would have to really adjust it. And then there are negatives to listening to the pros because I think, in my opinion, they often don't know what the fuck they're talking about when it comes to balance. They just don't know what they know how to do. And listening to them, it's gonna make them feel good, which is really positive given the way Valorant's taking players. But unfortunately, there are also negatives to that as well, and I don't think it's necessarily all that much better.
Isn't the listening to pros angle too? So like, there's so much of a conflict of interest there that I would never really be able to sit right with it. Like, you can listen to them insofar as you take on their feedback because they are going to offer a valuable perspective, but I don't think you can ever make it so that like it's a massive influence on your decision. You have to sort of like, it goes back to the American idea that the American response food that you mentioned, where you've got to take every feedback that you receive and consider the source and consider how it works.
That guy said he wasn't American, by the way, but I don't believe him. I don't believe him.
I doubt your non-Americanness, sir. So I think there's an element of that where you do actually legitimately as a developer, you've got to go with what you think, but then you also have to temper that with what other people are saying who are very experienced. And maybe in this sense, there's still a different like selection bias or whatever, but maybe if you get it from analysts, you get it from these people who are very aware of how the game works. You get it from people like Vu who know every single bug in the book, and that's how he gets to global. And you get all of these people who know the game inside and out, and you actually legitimately can build some sort of information as to what needs to be fixed, right? We talked on this podcast, this talk show, so many different times about how the smoke bug where you sit in a smoke and get an advantage is like so ridiculous and shouldn't be in the game. Yet at the same time, like there's had to be, it's sort of like the vertigo thing where people have had to decide their competitive careers potentially, or the degree to which they find success in a game at the very least, based around a bug or a bad map or whatever. And in such a situation, like if you're literally saying, well, if you see a smoke and you know somebody was nearby, you better spray that motherfucker left, right, and center and empty all of your ammo into that. Because otherwise, like you could just get destroyed by the guy who's sitting in the smoke and waiting for it to, or you do that or hide or whatever. There's really not too many options for you. So I do think that really leaves a sour taste in players' mouths, and maybe that's an element of why they might want to switch over to Valorant, even though odds are Riot aren't going to be listening to them for too much longer. But I think as well, the selection bias there, you want to get as many different perspectives as possible in terms of people who are embedded into the space. And that way you can probably make a significantly more informed decision, I would say. The fact that professional players in the past have said like, oh no, keep Nuke or keep Vertigo or whatever, when they're like, oh, they so happen to be one of the very few teams that are really good on this map. Like, gee, I wonder why Virtus Pro, the classic Polish lineup, really wanted to keep Nuke and the old Nuke in the map pool before it got reworked.
If I remember correctly, there was a petition years ago about the Molotovs in the game.
Okay,
a bunch of players came together and said, like, please remove them. And of course, like, I don't think they were as they are now, but it shows you that there's no like perfect situation, no matter what you do, basically. But things could definitely be improved.
Glaive still uses the just saying. It's like, even the best players in the world, they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
That is a bit egregious, don't you think? Like, why is he using that gun? Surely at this point, the MP9 should have replaced every SMG. It's just by far and away the better one.
My argument is the MP7 is the only other usable SMG. I think the MP7 is actually a really good gun. People don't use it.
The MP7 is also available on both sides too. So if you want something better than a Mac 10, you can pivot to that.
There was a time where, from a certain distance, and I'm not talking point blank range, but because I look at the stats sheet of all the weapons a fair bit, and there was a time where the CZ75 individual bullets did more damage than a FAMAS.
I remember
it's pretty wild.
One of my biggest things about the CZ is that gun was so obviously broken, and when it was first released, I didn't use it because I didn't initially use it well. Like, I struggled with it. And I was like, I'm going to have to spend some time to learn how to use this gun effectively if I'm going to use it. But that's a waste of time because it's going to get fixed. Took them like 9 months, by the way. It's possibly the most broken game ever. Which broken gun rather. So broken that the broken Tech 9 wasn't even used because the CZ was there.
It's better.
It's like, and that it took them 9 months, man. It's a little bit ridiculous.
I can sympathize with when Thorin made that video talking about the weapon balance, the Valve's watered down weapon balance, I think is the title. Don't know why I still have that in my head, but he made a video where he goes over it. I can sympathize with his point of view a lot because he does talk about how, like, these fucking pistols, you make one of them so much more broken than everything else, and then you fix that 9 months later, and the next one is still broken. You haven't even fixed that. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, it was ridiculous in like 2014, 2015. I'm sorry.
Oh fuck! Do you remember? Speaking of the introduction of was it the revolver, when the revolver was introduced, where literally every other pistol got nerfed by like 5 to 15%, purely on the introduction of this one gun?
It might have been.
Was it the revolver? Or was it the CZ? I remember, like, day one, they nerfed every single other weapon. I'm like, why? Like, were these weapons all broken before? Like, what is the meaning of this? And sure, you want to encourage people to like use the new weapon, but that's not the way to do it. It was insane.
Yeah, that's like reversing. Like they do work backwards a lot with Valve. Like they are just like results oriented company almost in that sense, where they do look to get to the data. Sort of what Vu mentioned earlier, where they waited for the event that the Krieg killed the AK, and then suddenly we'll nerf it. They also go like completely the wrong way.
I think they reversed that reasonably quickly, but it was outrageous. But I'll find the update for you, so I'll link you to it when I can find it.
Sure, yeah. I do feel like Valve specifically have this really whack angle of like, maybe it's almost like vengeful and spiteful. I don't know if this is really the case. This is what it feels like.
This is the Krieg, right?
Yeah. Like the fact that they go from like, we want all of the weapons to be useful in their own situations, which is a fair thing. Okay, yeah, like, weapons in the game, it should have a purpose, right? So sure, make it useful in certain situations. And the Krieg is still useful despite their fucking best efforts, because after everybody was like, nerf the Krieg, Valve at CSGO on Twitter, nerf the Krieg. Like, where's the fucking Krieg nerf? And then like they're like, okay, let's do it. And like even the Twitter poll was like, do you want what do you want out of this update? And it says nerf the Krieg, and then the other option is like in oscillating uppercase and lowercase text, make it operation. Like, okay, go fuck yourself, Valve. Like, come on, man. Like, there's a reason. It's like they are taking the piss in that respect. Sure, they probably get it really, really ridiculously high. Like whoever runs that Twitter account must get so much.
No, I think that's an indication that the CSGO team is really small. That like that type of almost. I find it hard to believe that the Krieg deserved just a small tweak and then an absolute nuke of all of its stats like a month later. It was like 2 months later, maybe.
They didn't even change anything about the stats. Remember, they only changed the price initially. That's what manifested everything.
Yeah, it just feels like the only explanation that makes any sense to me is that they just someone like their team is so small that someone being essentially vindictive is like that allowed to happen. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, because I would like to see the Krieg have coexist with the AK-47, just like I would like to see the AUG coexist with the M4. And it has happened, to Valve's credit. But this is, again, kind of like a results-oriented approach if you look at it this way, because they didn't need to nerf it to the ground. I think, honestly, you could keep it relatively... Like, there's some things that are just like bullshit and have no counterplay, but you could keep most of the stats relatively the same, and then just make it priced affordably, like somewhere in between.
I didn't like that one too much. I thought it needed to be stats nerfed because I made this. I made this one. I vocalized this opinion before. The reason I didn't like the initial price increase is because all it does is delay the oppressiveness of the Krieg
Yes.
till later, because there are going to be games where the T side gets way ahead and then they can afford it, and that gun was so ridiculously strong that it's just like as soon as they have it, they just have this massive advantage. And because the T side has such an economic advantage to begin with, they're going to have 2 rounds with it. They're almost certainly going to win one of those rounds, and then what worst case scenario, they go back to the AKs. It just feels like delaying the oppressiveness of that gun if you don't make it. Like the only solution would be make it like 4,500 or 5K, and it's like this. Well, now
it would be appropriately priced at 5K.
Yeah, I mean, at 45.
That's what I was saying as well.
At 4,500, maybe
raise the price.
I just think that it would be better to remove the stats a little bit. Personally,
it would be healthier. It's like if you buy a gun and odds are you win every single time. Like that's not a healthy game state. But yeah, if you can get to the point where it's a risk reward, because the other thing too that nobody really likes to talk about is it was fucking overpowered, more so for CTs when they got their hands on it. Like there's a clip that I remember from it must have been 2019 where Simple is literally dropping an op and then taking the Krieg from the fallen T and shooting another Krieg into the arms of, it's Electronic shooting it into the arms of Simple, and Simple drops his op for this fucking gun. Like it was out of control. And like the fact that they had these so coordinated, like quick before the freeze time starts, like as soon as the round ends, like start shooting the Kriegs into each other's hands. Like what have we come to, man? Why has it come to this?
The B bomb fight on Dust 2 was so strong for that Krieg.
Yeah.
Someone was. I remember at the time of its nerf, someone was theorizing that I think maybe because of the engine, there was a limit on where the fire rate could be, because I think it's too slow now. I don't know if this is true or not, but I think it should definitely be a bit faster than it is currently. Also, in the interest of fairness, I found a post, and it was just a movement inaccuracy, so maybe I made it sound worse than it was. So when the Revolver was released, they increased the move and accuracy on Elite 5.7, Glock P2000, PC50, Tech 9 USP, and CZ75. So not actually the most terrible thing in the world.
Some would say they're still too accurate while moving now. You never know.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of potential within CS2 for like really wacky ideas that unfortunately we'll never see, because the community wasn't going to use the overpowered AUG and Krieg when they were just like $300 more expensive, and Valve just had to say $50 more expensive. Stop buying decoys and buy this gun instead. And then suddenly like the usage exploded at the professional level. I do think like this is an area where taking thinking and applying it from other esports or other disciplines, I guess, where you try to find some other tool that you have access to but you haven't explored, some other avenue, that could really benefit CS. I feel like to some extent, that's why you actually see so much like close range positioning with deagles now, because it's so obvious that two body shots, I think it is, just instantly wipe somebody. Like that's crazy. That's obviously a stupid statistic and should be fixed. But like figuring out how to balance that alongside wanting to keep the one bullet headshot, if that's something that Valve even want to do, I assume that they would. And I assume we as a community would prefer it that way, because otherwise, like, why are you even buying the deagle? There is an element of that where I feel like there's things that are lurking still, like 2014, 2015 style, where people are going to start using a gun and it's going to be broken. Here's one. The Nova is fucking broken. Nobody knows about the
shotgun is broken. Man.
Okay, the auto shotgun has its place. It's already been sort of adopted in some ways. The Nova can one bullet headshot you from a surprising distance if you aim slightly to the right of the head. I don't know why it's slightly to the right.
Same thing with the auto shotgun.
Okay.
Well, because they've got a pattern, but the pattern is always...
It's offset, yeah.
It's always the same. So it's like offset a little bit.
Yes, they changed it so that there's no RNG anymore. It was like one of the recent patches.
So with the auto shotty, if you want to do the most damage, I think you aim at like their left shoulder or something. And that's how, their right shoulder, but your perspective, their left shoulder. Yeah. I also think the Negev is actually super viable. I personally, I think it's actually
I was
really
saying this
You're on crack. Who's on crack?
It's 1,700. You can basically...
Super viable.
No, okay, super viable. It's viable enough that I think it could be in a position where you see it bought like once or twice. I think it could definitely be bought that often. If you have like 2350, you buy a Negev and body armor. It can surprising. People think it's super inaccurate. It is a surprising range that you can be fairly certain you'll hit them in the head without already starting your spray. And if you hit them in the head in your first 2 bullets, which are fairly accurate, it's like bullet 3 to 9 that are really inaccurate. So if you hit them in the first few shots, you're going to be able to finish them off really quickly, because you do like 95 damage or 99 if you're like even at the range where it's still accurate. I think it's viable. Just, not like you're not going to buy it all the time. It's just like, maybe once or twice in a best of 3. I think it's worth that much.
What I think is cool about the having varied weapons is if you get a kill with a weapon that your opponent perceives to be stupid, I feel like you can put your opponent on tilt.
Yes,
for that reason.
Absolutely.
So I like the idea of a gamble purchase here and there. What was I about to say? I have no idea. Never mind.
That is the best part. Maybe it might come back to you. That is the best part of killing somebody with a Nova from like half. Like I can be sitting from like sandwich looking down a ramp on Mirage, and I can 1-bullet headshot somebody that peeks into me. Like it's actually fucked. Like it's ridiculous. Like or I could, another angle is like I think with some strafing I can actually 2-bullet kill somebody from Palace or from stairs looking Palace. Like if you can imagine that. That's with a Nova, which is 1050. You can buy that anytime, basically. So like,
I actually own a Nova in real life. I bought one because it was in Counter-Strike, basically.
Oh, okay.
And I think I could potentially buy a Scout in the UK. I'm not 100% sure.
Is it just for like? Have you decided to go hunting for it by any chance, or is it just for show, sort of like a stream prop or something?
I have 3 shotguns.
Okay.
The problem though, like I only do clay pigeon shooting, but the problem, there's like a safety issue with the Nova because it's a single barrel.
Okay. Yeah.
Basically, like if you're walking around like a clay shooting ground, you normally break your shotgun so people can see that it can't be shot. But you can't do that with a single barrel. So you have this like big orange flag which you put where you load the shotgun shells. But generally speaking, a lot of places just ban them for safety reasons because you can't always tell if there's like a shell in there or not. So people would normally use that to shoot pigeon, for example. But I had that Sounds of CSGO series where we would shoot the guns in real life to see how the sound compares in the game, just for nerdy reasons because people enjoy that shit. I do at the very least. But yeah, no, I normally shoot a double-barreled gun rather than that one. But yeah, it's just fun to have.
I will say,
it's fun to pump shotgun as well. Like it's got that kind of Arnie feel to it.
I was gonna say, from the in-game look and feel, it does seem like it would be kind of an annoying one to harken around. But if you know how to pump it and you know how to like get the next shot loaded, so to speak, could certainly be pretty. I can see the satisfaction from like somebody who watched a lot of like classic war movies or like Stallone or whatever, like back in the day. That would probably be pretty like cathartic, perhaps, to be like, just for a second, you're an action star. I don't know, something.
Yeah, there's a boy's fantasy in there for sure with the pump shotgun.
Yeah. Do you own any firearms, Vu?
No, I'm not interested in firearms even in the slightest. I haven't even like considered it.
That's interesting because
I'm Canadian, so it's a little bit harder to manage than the US, right? But
I was going to bring that up.
It's not interesting.
I heard a story that everybody in Canada is nice, leaves their doors unlocked, and has a rifle. Can you corroborate this? Because I feel like there's a connection there.
Everyone in Canada is definitely not nice. I suggest you go look up the YouTube channel Drivers of Vancouver because there's constant fucking road rage going on. And yeah, it's just there's a lot of shit drivers in Vancouver too. There's a suburb that is known for really shitty driving, and I swear to God, every time I go there, I almost get in an accident by some of the dumbest driving you could possibly imagine. It doesn't help that the roads in that suburb are built like just the dumbest possible way, like driveways into the number 3 road, driveways opening right into number 3 road, and it's like jam packed, and people aren't letting anybody in, and they just fuck it, I'm driving out like. Oh, it's so bad. It's actually so bad. And everyone gets so angry. Holy shit. Yeah. Drivers of Vancouver. People aren't very nice.
Are those the French Canadians?
Some super violent gangs in Canada as well. I've read about them. I'm not sure. I don't recall if they're like biker gangs or something, but there's like some crazy shit going on that no one seems to know about.
Hells Angels is pretty legit here.
Yeah. They're not messing about.
Yeah, I heard the Mounties are pretty fierce. Couldn't say that one. All right, it's fair enough. Okay, so not every Canadian is nice, and I guess not every Canadian owns a gun. Do you leave your front doors open? That's the only other question.
No, well, actually, one of the stories my mom tells about why the front door always needs to be locked is one time, my dad was in bed at like 8 a.m. I think he was working graveyards or something. He was in bed maybe like 10 a.m. Someone walks in the front door, some huge drunk dude looking for his girlfriend, thinking my dad is the guy that slept with his girlfriend, and he was looking for the guy that lived next door in the back. And for some reason, he came in our front door to get to, and he was just like freaking out. And my dad was just like, just woke up. And it was like this huge fucking problem trying to get this guy the fuck out because he was like trying to beat up the dude that slept with his girlfriend. So yeah. Always lock the front door. It's always locked.
What if he was
Never
just
gonna
passing
forget
through?
that story.
He just needs to get to the back.
Just get to the back and then go around to the other house at the back of that house. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I don't know. There could be some that could be. There's a recipe for some scene in some comedy somewhere where you just start walking through somebody. It's probably even happened. Just walk through somebody's door is like just passing through. See, oh, nice food you got on the stove there. Yeah, great. And then just some fucking stranger. Fair enough. All right, what I'll say is. We've talked quite a bit about like the casual side of the game and like what Valve is doing or not doing. I'm kind of interested in ways that Valve could actually focus a bit more on the professional scene because we've talked a lot about like their lack of attention in terms of like for a while they weren't even doing operations. I think is this real? Was it really something like 4 years since between like Hydra and?
No, I think there was like 2 maybe.
Okay, maybe it wasn't that long then. Yeah, it was like between Hydra and Shattered Web. I think were the last the two before we had this one, Broken Fang. It is a pretty long distance, and people were certainly like confused and perplexed. And even since then, they've obviously changed the way that they handle map pools, and like they don't really package the maps with the operations to the same degree now. They kind of have this more free form rotation, which I guess makes sense because they weren't doing operations for a while, but still wanted to have some custom maps in. So we talked a little bit about that. We did touch on map pool changes a little bit. We talked about how bad Vertigo is, but is there something else that we're missing for what Valve would be able to do to help support the esports side of things? Because it seems like every now and then, right? And maybe you can speak to this, James, because I'm sure you have some perspective here. There's a lot of people, industry pundits, who have talked about how CSGO seems to be like on its way out and that things are very grim and that you don't fully understand or you can't really fully know how bad it is from the outside or as somebody who's maybe not as embedded into the space as I am compared to you guys. Like a lot of people are saying that, like, especially in terms of esports anyway, in terms of competition, that the game is on its way out. The game is in dire straits, especially with the North American stuff. Is there something that, like, do you think that this claim is even true? Is it really the case that like this industry is sort of falling apart? And if so, or even if not, like, is there something that the Valve specifically you think could be doing that would be pretty easy for them to do and would yield some really nice results?
So I think CS has one major problem in terms of its how touchable it is by non-endemic entities like a Coca-Cola and stuff. For example, if you look at Street Fighter is pop culture for various reasons. You know, everyone's played it, and I think that's every man and woman's more or less played it, and they'll tell you what character they used to play back in the day. I'll travel around, and you know, someone will ask me what I do, and then a lot of the time, that person, especially if it's a guy, has played Counter-Strike in the past. It's like, oh, that's still going on and stuff. But I think the major issue is, especially, you know, like the USA is the biggest market for Counter-Strike. But it is also, like, I'd say guns are also the biggest problem in America. So from a sponsor's point of view, if they want to like slap their name all over something, like, it's one thing if you sponsor a team that does multiple games or an event that has multiple games at the event, because then it's like you're kind of sponsoring the event, not directly the game. So
yeah, diffusion of responsibility, right?
You can go around it a little bit, like, oh, there's League of Legends here, you know. But I think the game at this point should be. I think the game is like more acceptable than potential bit like a Nike or a Coca-Cola perceives it to be. But it's like, I think for a lot of these companies, it's not worth them taking a risk where there could be enormous backlash and boycotting from them, because obviously you've got politics. You know, you've always got that idiot politician is like, we need to look at these violent games and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And all this unfounded stuff. And I think, like, especially in the USA, like misinformation and just putting out false shit to distract people from other stuff is rife everywhere. And I think that's one thing. It's like, are we ever going to get to the point where someone's like, you know, they're like get behind the game and realize that the public like accepts and enjoy this. And I think, like TBS took massive strides in that respect. And you would have like a lower third of a Snickers or something, but I mean, maybe, do you know what? If they had the viewership that they needed, I think that potentially could have really helped people come on boards, because they're kind of taking the lead on it. And you had like an Arby's and so on, but I think the larger things like Coca-Cola and like the really big things, because if you think about demographics, right? If you look at this European Super League thing that we had with like soccer in Europe recently, where they tried to make a Super League, they're basically saying that in terms of demographics, they've got an aging population. The youngsters is not coming in because they're not watching TV. Their lifestyles and passions lie elsewhere, right? Like esports has the demographic that all these people don't have. All these people used to have when the family was like tied to the TV. So like we have everything going for us in that respect. We have the demographic that people want. Like even WWE, they're like, I think their strongest demo is like over 50s, for example. Like nothing really touches esports and gaming in terms of the demos that people want to advertise to. And in terms of Counter-Strike, like it's the easiest game to follow and understand. And yeah, you've got rivals like Valorant, but Valorant's a champion-led game in that they'll always have updates with more champions, with more abilities. Like you've got a character that launches like dogs and eagles and stuff. Like the average person can't watch that. I remember like at the Boston Major, there was so when Stewie made that play on the B bomb site of Inferno, that was like a very long passage of commentary for me, bearing in mind that I have asthma. Like my heart was going after that. The point of this is like, so under our stage we would have I mean, we've got like, there'll be like a guard in case anyone wants to do something done, but there's also be like an assistant, so if we need something like a runner, like water, etc. And I was literally waving at him to get me some water, and he was so engrossed in what was going on the screen above, he was just moving his head away from my hand to watch the game. But the point of that is like the layman, the person who's not a gamer, can understand what Counter-Strike is, and that's such a strong thing. And that's the thing we have over every other game. The only game that may come close to that was like previous versions of Street Fighter, but even then we're ahead. So my point is like we have the best game to appeal. We have the best game. We've got the best demographics. But it's just that tipping point where like we need like one company to like be like, all right, we're going to go forward with this, and then the other companies are like, do you know what? Like all the lifestyle brands, like cars, everything, all this kind of stuff like that could be advertised to people who are becoming adults and stuff. It's insane the stuff we have. It's just that people are just like, do you know what? It's just, is it really worth us taking this risk? They're still just putting stuff on TV, even though they've got declining viewerships and so on. That's like the biggest issue in terms of the viability of Counter-Strike. That's like the massive thread, which has always been an issue for us. And again, it's become more and more accessible, but it still just hasn't really hit that mark. But also, I think like that's an issue with TV where people are still sinking advertisers still sinking their money into TV, because like if you're advertising on TV, right, like you're advertising on TBS, your whole audience is American. If that same company wants to advertise on a broadcast, like maybe 30% or something of their audience is going to be American, or 40%, whatever it's going to be, but they feel like they're wasting their money on the others, even if they're advertising to more of who they actually want to advertise to, because the demo is stronger. So you've got like, there are complicated issues like this, which from looking from the inside, it's like the biggest issue for me. And from a viewer's perspective, there are different measures like what's happening with map pool and so on, what the developers are doing. But like from my perspective, someone who works on like with the game, that's the biggest like underlying issue that the game has had.
Do you think a counter-terrorist thing, you think that has any merit?
Do you know what? It kind of depends on what's been happening recently in the news. Like if someone does something in America and shoots up a place in something that can be considered So I guess my answer is yes, because if like somebody's done something which essentially equates to like, like a hate crime, like a terrorist event, then obviously that makes it very, very tricky to do this kind of thing. But I don't think that's the solution, because you're still using weapons and shooting humans, and that seems to be a problem.
I think small steps might be helpful. Like, there could be some push to get a little bit away from it. I've someone said this wasn't my original thought, but threat counter threat always seemed like a very obvious change that could be made, because it doesn't actually change anything for the people playing the game.
Yeah.
But you do change the terminology, and I think cancel culture. I do think cancel culture is actually one of the major worries, where it's like Mercedes sponsors event where there are terrorists attacking bomb sites and trying to bomb people, and especially if there was ever like a violent action at one of these events, like a CS event had I think it was the Call of Duty, or was it FIFA that was shot up?
There was a Madden tournament.
Yeah, Madden. There you go. Yeah, if that thing happened at CS, then I feel like all of the sponsors could potentially come under fire for that type of thing, which is scary for them, I'm sure. And I looked into this just a tiny bit. There are a surprising number of sponsors that aren't visible on CSGO jerseys, but are on others. For example, Orange, the main sponsor for Vitality, I believe, they're a French telecommunications company. They're not on the CS jerseys. You don't see their name. You see it prominently displayed on their League of Legends team. There's also a couple car companies that have done that, where they're just not on the CS jerseys. It definitely is a real thing.
For sure. And there are some, I'm not going to say their exact names, but there are like some big entities who are in our space who they'll like sponsor things around an event, but not the event itself, for example, because they don't want that direct connection. So they might get involved in like an after party or something. So they're like part of the culture, but they're not like, but in that respect, some of these things are improving. But again, it's just like one company, or one company here, one company there, but it's not really like again, I don't know where the tipping point is, like how far away we are from it. So it's really hard to tell. But again, I just feel like I think that a lot of these entities just feel like it's not a risk worth taking. But I think over time, but we're talking years here, there's going to be more and more pressure in this regard. In our favor, because again, it's crazy. Like there are still records deals being done by TV stations for like WWE are making more money than ever, because their viewership's declining, but all of TV is declining. But then at what point do you start saying to yourself, like, if this demo is like over 50s and so on, like at what point do you take a more serious look at where people are that your target demographic is spending their time, and how you target them, because it has to change eventually, but who knows.
Longevity is not usually a concern it should be, but it doesn't seem to usually be a concern for a lot of people, especially I guess in esports. One of the things that I've heard, obviously, the terrorist counter-terrorist debate before, and I feel like I'm a personal purist. I would love it for it to keep everything, and like, I'm not saying it needs to go even farther than it currently is, where it has to start like using legit terrorist organization groups or something, the same way that it's done that. I think maybe it actually has in some ways. I don't really remember, but like, I'm not saying I need to be like playing as Al Qaeda or some shit, right? Like, I'm not like going that far. Whereas, like, I guess you are technically playing as legit counter-terrorist outfits across the world.
We're going to need to censor this for the YouTube release.
Sure. Yeah. So,
but there's the space guns as well. If you look at like an Overwatch, a lot of it is space guns, and even like a Soldier 76 is kind of doesn't feel. It's not set like in a realistic world. It's all cartoony, and that's part of why they do that for FPS. So it's more acceptable to the sponsors and so on. Like Overwatch got some pretty big. I think they did get Coca-Cola in a partnership at some point for like their first or second season. And that's the way around it. If you're building from the ground up, is you have these like cartoony, so it doesn't feel like it's set in reality. But our game has always been that. It's it's what it is, and it's okay. It's not going to make them go and fucking Imagineer on Dust 2 like in the local library or something. But it's the old bastards who don't understand gaming, who it's like they want to say something which resonates with parents at home and gets them votes, whether it fucks people over or not. So that's kind of what we're fighting against, unfortunately.
I think Valorant has like just the exact right amount of plausible deniability, because you're planting the fucking spike, you're planting it and it blows up, but it's not a bomb, it's a spike. And so if you're like, I think it's partly to do with just like the potential for like, you know, look at what Coca-Cola's sponsoring, you know, they're sponsoring a terrorist team, you know, look at them on the terrorists. Right. I feel like it's just like it's a lot less like it's a lot less you can't buy into it quite the same if it's like, well, they're planting a bomb, but it's called the spike. But you need to understand that it is a bomb they're planting, and they are terrorizing you know, you have to go a layer deep. If you have to go a layer deep, people are already gone. Their eyes have glazed over.
Yeah, they've completely left it. That was my next point, is that I don't like it would disappoint me, and it would reduce my faith in humanity to find out that literally just changing the name would all, like, if it's counter threat instead, if that actually,
I think
had
that would
some
just be a step, you know.
Yeah,
like
it might be.
Step,
I don't think it would fix
steps.
everything. I'm just saying, if that actually ended up being like a significant change to get Counter-Strike more acceptable by the masses, it was literally just changing like part of the text, I would be like, I can't say I'd be surprised, but I would be kind of disappointed. Like, really, this is what you like? All of a sudden,
no, it might be possible. It might be possible because I think we have a fantastic body of work in terms of the spectacle of Counter-Strike, the amazing moments we've had at majors, people putting their phone lights on, even at that moment at that blast. I think it was Lisbon, with the whole crowd chanting, like all these epic moments. Like, it's a great catalog of work to show someone how compelling our content is. So maybe it is, I don't know, calling it like protagonist and antagonist or whatever the fuck, or maybe just calling it the like leak crew rather than just make it like leak crew and GIGN or anything. Maybe that would be enough. But like, it would be a sacrifice of like some of the culture. If you think of the terrorists win, like you think of all the sounds and stuff that have changed in the game. That terrorist win is the same from many years ago because it's part of our culture. But if we have to sacrifice that for the greater good, then so be it. But I guess you don't know until you take that chance. And I don't know, man.
I've been of the opinion basically that Valorant could actually be very helpful for CS as long as CS is basically around in some semi-competitive manner in a couple of years, because I think a lot of players are going to want to come back because they do miss CS. I think a lot of what made Valorant really big is that CS players hate CS. They all they love it and they hate it. That's like, I made a poll on my YouTube. I got like 50,000 responses. About 65% of people said they have said, I hate this game in regards to CS in the last week. 65%. And that's like YouTube audience. That's semi-casual, right? And there was just never another game that had anywhere near the same feel of CS. And I think Valorant captured that, and it captured an audience that wanted to try something else, but it's never been able to. And I think people will realize, a lot of people have already kind of started to realize this, that they do prefer CS. It's a better game. It's more their style. As long as there are spaces for them to come back to, I think people will come back. It's just a matter of keeping it there, for a year or two.
Yeah.
Competition is definitely good. And I thought there's people like, scared when Overwatch came along, but like, this stuff it makes things more accessible. Like, at least, I mean, Overwatch is a different comparison, but that allowed people from different kinds of games to like discover FPS, and then they can be like, oh shit, Counter-Strike's like a much better game, like later on. And maybe some people, I think, Valorant, because of the abilities and so on, it might give people more space to kind of cover weaknesses they may have with aim and so on. And that's good, because then there's more space for more people to have more fun. But again, I think it's like, in some ways, it'll be a feeder. But I think like when any game is new and shiny and has updates and new characters and so on, it's going to draw a lot of attention. But when it gets to the point of saturation, then the real test begins. And that's for the general player base. But also with these players like moving to Valorant and so on, like, it's, again, any game of champions is only going to get, from where it begins, it's only going to get harder to watch because of all the abilities in the game and so on. And I think that stuff has a shelf life. I don't think it'll be as bad as Overwatch because I think there's more like traditional fighting and gameplay in that. But in terms of like players going over and so on, I feel like maybe some of these will have a longer career in Valorant, but not all of them. All of these guys going over are gonna find success. And I don't know if it's even established, like the measure of how good a player is in that game has even been established yet. But like some of these guys are going to be on the way back, sooner rather than later. So it'll be interesting though. Again, it is somewhat unprecedented, and it is quite interesting in that regard to see how it plays out.
I think some of the novelty is already worn off with a lot of the guys I'm talking to. A lot of the people I talk to are already pretty bored of Valorant, but it's actually not that. What's keeping them there is actually a lot of it is that Riot is communicating and they make them feel important. I actually think that's kind of underrated. Just the fact that Riot makes people feel like they care, and they I think it's really is a case of the grass is always greener. So they really want to experience Riot. And I think that's going to be a short-term thing as well, honestly, given what I've seen from Riot. Yeah. But I think to some extent it already has kind of worn off, and people are already, a lot of people are already bored of the agents and all of that shit coming in, because it's only going to get worse in my eyes, because you see it with League of Legends as well. They always want to make the new characters really overpowered so they can sell skins.
Yes.
They want to really cater to people that are complete noobs so that they stay around. People are going to only get more tired of that over time, and eventually they're going to realize that Riot talking nice to them doesn't actually mean fuck all, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's obviously like a massive point against anything that Riot does. I mean, obviously they've been killing it from a financial like success point of view, especially since they have like, I guess they probably have equally monetized microtransactions compared to CS, but it's a little bit more predatory in the way that they don't affect the game when you're just buying a cosmetic, but they will fuck with balance deliberately, in my opinion, having played that game for a number of times. And if you're just joining us for this episode, I am a game designer, so I have a little bit of shit to say about Riot. And I do think that they just generally don't have a cohesive vision, and they haven't so far in Valorant either. And I think that will eventually get people to be very, it'll eventually disgruntle enough people that there will be an influx of players going back. We've already seen some people who maybe they played Valorant for 3 months at most, and then they came to CS. And I see those threads on Reddit every now and then. I see people talking about that in their own like casual circles where, oh yeah, I played Valorant because I played League of Legends, and it turns out I actually really like to play FPS games, and I want to play something that's of a higher quality or something that won't change. I played at a semi-professional level in League of Legends, not to the same extent like, I guess nowadays, looking at it compared to when I played, it was a little bit laughable to call what I did semi-professional, but technically did. Like I was, I guess, the equivalent of like an IM or advanced, not an advanced. What's the one in between intermediate and
main?
That's a level above intermediate?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I was probably like a main player. I was Diamond 2, and which was like top 0.1% players in NA. It is in NA, so I was probably shit. But whatever. I managed to get to that point, and when I got to that point, I had my record season. I was a stud. The very next month, Riot changed the entire jungle and completely fucked everything that I learned, and I had to relearn everything. So I said, fuck this, and I quit. And that was a real big concern for me. It was a concern for tons of people who I had played with and then left. There's a ton of issues with that sort of approach, and that's what James was just talking about, where you have this agent-driven game where you are going to be changing things up and adding a bunch of crazy shit, some of which I think it's been all but confirmed that Riot deliberately added some easy mode champions because they wanted MOBA players to be able to play an FPS.
Yeah, so I can say what I think I said this last week. I'm sure I've said this a couple of times, but it really feels like the alpha was designed by a team of people that were like, make CS but not CS, basically. And then they made the comment that skills are meant to what is it? They're meant to complement aim play, gunplay, but they're not meant to replace it.
Yes.
And then the first character they add into the fucking beta is Raze. And it's like, just look at Raze. Like if you were trying to make a character for people that couldn't shoot back, what would you add in? You'd add in all the abilities Raze has. That's exactly what you do. And there it is, right there, the first character they add. I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, for sure not. And that's
I think CS, something that's important is that, sure, people might come back to CS, but the developers need to have a timing where there is something exciting for them to come back to, because I think, like, for sure, especially with like how much CS that pros need to play, there can certainly be burnout there if it's just the same stuff all the time. And again, with how stagnant the map pool has been, Vertigo, I think if you're, for the thinking man, there might be some stimulation inside the server, but I think perhaps we need something more dramatic. I don't know if it would be too savage if there were like 2 changes to the map pool at once, but maybe. But to be honest, even one new map which was more exciting to watch and play, along with say an operation that had more than the kind of chore style missions we've had. Some kind of development there. Like I think timing really is everything, and I think they really have to like hit the nail on the head there. Maybe like after the major, or like after the Valorant finals, or something that might be of interest. But they need to come out of the gates with something new here for the user base.
An interesting development I noticed recently on Twitter. It's a bit of an older article, but I saw it be discussed again somewhat recently. Talking about how Valve essentially had put a stop to the transition to Source 2 because of the fact that it was just very arduous of a process. That is a case where like a lot of people have said, mostly I imagine they weren't super informed, but a lot of people have said that Source 2, for one, like a lot of people have said it's coming. I see like development's happening. A lot of people have just said like they want it. They want to see what it's going to bring to us, and they're excited for that kind of shake up to the game. I feel like that is probably, at this point, I don't know that it's possible, because Valve have demonstrated that they can find a lot of seemingly long-term success, record highs, with doing very little. James mentions the grindy missions that are seemingly just kind of soulless, in my opinion, anyway. Like the fact that you just like, oh yeah, kill chickens in deathmatch, and it's stuff that you could complete on an empty server theoretically, instead of it really being about getting into the thick of playing the video game of Counter-Strike and playing it well and having a good time or whatever. So I feel like a lot of those types of things, they are very throwaway and filler, and they don't really add a lot to the experience. And maybe they're going to be good for people who like that sort of experience of jumping in and doing something every day, like the Apex Legends dailies that were mentioned earlier. But there's going to be something hollow about that experience versus actually being able to play the game and being able to maybe have a bit more content to actually sink your teeth into. I think, like, for example, the co-op missions are at least content that are unique, and they're not like I don't think they're very good, but you've got co-op missions where you're playing through like custom developed maps for the specific purpose, and you have these like whack bots that don't even really work very well that you have to shoot. It's like, okay, you've got something, and you could improve that, and you could not have them be terrible, but you at least have some content to play through if you're a player, which is a little bit better than the hollow stuff. So yeah, I feel like there's a ton of different ways that Valve could go for, and it all filters up towards like sponsors will look to what has the most viewership in some extent. James mentioned earlier that the sponsors are not, they're kind of having a very arm's length approach to CS, even though that has all the demographics. And to me, that's like, we almost have to go above and beyond. It's maybe you guys might protest to this sort of example or analogy, but to me, it's like trying to come up as a commentator. If you don't have any rapport, if you don't have any proven like track record, and CS would be the upcoming commentator in this example, then TOs, or sponsors as it were, are going to take a while to notice you. You have to prove that you're like statistically or otherwise that you're so far beyond the competition and the other things that they already know, because of that sort of recency bias or familiarity bias that they have. You need to really wow them, and maybe more so than you actually should have to in a just fair world or whatever, where we're just looking at it meritocratically, just based on your merits. I think a lot of people kind of underestimate how like set in their ways a lot of these companies are, just because like their demographics are in the 50s, like to the people that for WWE or whatever, and they're still on TV and not on a streaming service or whatever. Like their methods are very dated. So I think their approach in general is probably also going to be pretty dated, and we are going to have to, as a community, as a game, or as a sport, as a competition, we're going to need to get very high up there in terms of metrics in order to get somewhere with the more mainstream sources. And we have to do that in spite of the fact that there's a lot of I guess we'll say lore or narrative based things like the terrorists and stuff that are kind of impeding that growth. And I think anything at this point from Valve that encourages more people to play the game, to talk about the game, to watch the game on stream, would be a welcome benefit, welcome change. We just don't really have that. We have seemingly the exact opposite with this like streaming shit that we talked about earlier.
They need to add Death Run into the game. Death Run is
what is Death Run?
That would be Death Run. So basically, I don't know if James knows Death Run. It was really common in Source, where basically you've got a bunch of obstacles, and the one team is activating the obstacles, and they try and kill you as you run across the map. I feel like that would be a change that would be really good for casuals that could be added in Operation pretty easily.
Do you remember there was? I've actually I only played. I ran a gun game server in Source, but I didn't do much else in Source. But there was this. I think he's a Russian developer, and he made loads of like crazy maps, like co-op maps. I remember Shroud's subscription sound. Where the fuck I am? I think it was from this map. I was playing one of them recently, where you know, like all those things. I'm like, why aren't these things more accessible? Like those big co-op maps are like crazy and super fun, but it's a great way for like a 14-year-old to spend an hour just running around just mindlessly on those crazy maps. Like I would love to see, but again, it depends. And it's a company where you know you choose what you choose to work on. But I'd love to see like something like that in the game, or things to even make it a little more. I mean, you could say that the game isn't friendly. Like, let's say, like cheating and matchmaking aside, you could say the game isn't friendly to newbies, but it's always kind of, you know, people have always found their way, right? Which is maybe why they haven't done anything with that, like training, that arms training thing that they have as like, you know, that was released and was just never improved upon. There's never been anything added there. But I feel like, you know, part of the reason apparently they don't want to port it is because it would break all the community made stuff. But then I don't know, the community made stuff could be a little more accessible, I feel like, or they could do something like that co-op map. I don't know how much like development time that would be, but those were really fun back in the day. There's all kinds of just crazy mods. I was playing one where the Wild West restaurant mod with my mates the other day, where like during the day you have these NPC customers and you have to like generate money by feeding them food and cleaning pots and stuff, and then at night you try and rob each other's banks and stuff. It's like little crazy games, but they're lots of fun, and they're all community made. But you know, there's just like so much stuff which, again, it depends on resources, and I feel like there's probably a priority list, because I know there's a priority list. So like, while in a perfect world some of this stuff might happen, I know from when I was spamming them when we couldn't draw on a map, and I was spamming them nonstop every week. I even made a clock in our studio for how many days it had been, and they were aware of that. They were I got some troll emails from them as well, but I know there's like there's definitely a priority list, but again, we just don't know anything that's going on. So who the fuck knows? Like, even some of the things we're talking about could be in the pipeline, but we just have no idea. So
wasn't it like almost a year, or maybe over a year, where you couldn't draw, or was it not that long?
It was over a year. It was over a year.
Yeah, that's fucking.
It was
crazy.
over a year. Yeah.
Well, you want to talk about long-term things, like somebody in the chat brought up the demo viewer, right? Like that's another case where it's like, why is that? They did that index thing, which makes it speedier, but it's still not ideal.
Isn't that still only in the beta, or?
No, you can just turn it off or turn it
on.
on.
No, I think it's faster. Yeah, it's faster to search for a demo.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is like, there are pros and cons. There are pros and cons with an older engine. One of the pros is that when you've been using an engine for a long time, you know the ins and outs of it, and you're less likely to come across bugs. But then one of the cons is, you know, if they add something like over here, it might break something over there. And then you've got to figure out why it's broken and try and fix it. And that's the thing that we're seeing in the game at the same time. And obviously there's going to be limitations, like the size of the map you can have, and maybe it relates to what they can do with the demo viewer. I don't know, but it's they're in a bit of a catch-22 there, I suppose.
It's the perks of dealing with a very old ornery engine, and the fact that it is still technically based in Source 1 is pretty like damning for them, I think.
Right. I think we've discussed for a good period of time. I think we wind the podcast down.
Yeah, sure.
I'm pulling a thorn. I'm saying I think we're done here.
You think you're done here? All right. What do you think, James? Do you have any sort of last final words, final message to the fans? Obviously, you're going to be working this Flashpoint event pretty soon, so that must be exciting. Anything else that's on the radar that you wanted to get off your chest?
No, I'll just see you soon, bitches.
There you go. See you soon, bitches. Maybe that's the title. I guess I get demonetized if I put bitches.
I'm going to be playing Mythic League. That I like to say that I'll announce my triumphant return to Mythic League after more than a year. So prepare to get fucked.
There you go. What about you, Vu? Got any videos coming?
Eventually, someday.
Eventually, someday. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of ELO Heaven in the Can. Thanks for joining us, James, and good luck with the rest of your staycation, as it were. And looking forward to seeing you in Mythic League owning and in Flashpoint 3.
Thank you. Definitely not a vacation. Those are illegal right now.
There you go.